"I'm sorry I'm late," she whispered. Rain dripping down her face, shoes ruined, dress soaked through. Standing outside the most expensive restaurant in Chicago, talking to nobody, because she was already sure he'd left. She almost turned around. She almost walked away. And if she had, she never would have known that the man sitting alone at that corner table, calm, immovable, waiting, was the most feared man in the city. This is the story of one wrong night that changed everything. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The blind date. Violet Bennett had a rule about first impressions. She believed you could tell almost everything you needed to know about a person in the first 30 seconds of meeting them. Not from what they said, not from how they looked, but from what they did when something went wrong. Did they panic? Did they blame someone else? Did they pretend nothing happened? Or did they hold still? She had built that rule over 26 years of watching her mother hold still through power shutoffs and empty refrigerators, and the kind of quiet desperation that never made it into anyone's Instagram feed. Her mother held still through a husband who left when Violet was 9, through double shifts at the diner, through the particular humiliation of returning Christmas gifts the day after Christmas because the electric bill had come in higher than expected. Violet had learned stillness from the woman who never once cried in front of her children. What Violet had not learned, what nobody had ever taught her, was how to walk into a restaurant looking like she'd been dragged backward through a car wash and still hold her chin up. That skill, as it turned out, she was going to have to figure out on the fly. It was a Thursday evening in October, and Chicago had apparently decided to remind everyone that it did not care about anyone's plans. The wind had been manageable at 4 in the afternoon. By 5:30, when Violet was still at the shop trying to finish the Pemberton order, 14 arrangements for a corporate lobby, because Mrs. Pemberton always called on the day she needed things and expected them done yesterday, the sky had turned the specific shade of gray that meant the city was done playing nice. By 6:15, when she finally locked the shop door behind her, the rain had started. Not a gentle rain. Not the kind of rain that made the streets look romantic and the streetlights look like watercolor paintings. This was the kind of rain that arrived sideways, that found the gaps in your umbrella like it was personally offended by the existence of your umbrella, that soaked through shoes in 30 seconds flat. Violet had taken the bus because her car had been in the shop for 11 days longer than originally estimated, which was a theme in her life, and she had planned her route to the restaurant with 15 minutes of buffer time. The bus broke down at Michigan and Wacker, not slowed down, not rerouted. It stopped, made a sound like a large animal giving up, and the driver got on the intercom and said, with the particular exhaustion of a man who had delivered this news too many times, that they were going to be stopped for a little while. A little while turned out to mean 45 minutes. Violet stood in the back of that bus watching the rain sheet against the windows, watching the minutes tick forward on her phone, and ran the calculations that a person runs when the evening is coming apart in real time. She could text him. She could cancel. She could explain that it wasn't her fault that the bus broke down, that she was so sorry that maybe they could reschedule, except she had almost canceled twice already, and Emily had talked her out of it both times. And if she canceled again, Emily was going to show up at her apartment with wine, and the specific expression that meant a 2-hour conversation about Violet's tendency to self-sabotage. So, she stayed on the bus. She stayed on the bus, and she watched the rain, and she scrolled back through the 3 things Emily had told her about him. His name was Adrian. He worked in business. Emily had been vague about the specifics in a way that Violet had found slightly irritating. He was a friend of a cousin, which was the kind of origin story that either meant he was perfectly ordinary or that nobody wanted to claim direct responsibility for introducing him to anyone. And he was, in Emily's exact words, the kind of man who makes a room go quiet when he walks in, but not in a scary way, more like a gravity way. Violet had asked Emily what that meant. Emily had said, "You'll understand when you meet him," which had not been reassuring. The bus got moving again at 7:03. Violet got off 4 blocks from the restaurant and ran, in heels, through a sideways Chicago rainstorm, past people who had the sense to be standing under awnings, past taxis she couldn't afford, past the kind of gleaming restaurant frontage that made it clear from 50 yards away that this was the sort of place where the menu didn't have prices on it. She stopped outside the door. She stood in the rain for a moment and tried to think about what to do with herself. Her umbrella had turned inside out somewhere around Van Buren, and she'd thrown it in a trash can. Her hair, which she had spent 45 minutes on that morning, had given up entirely. Her dress, dark blue, the nicest thing she owned, that wasn't technically work clothes, was soaked through at the shoulders and hem. One of her heels had a crack in it that she could feel with every step. She looked at her phone. 7:18. She was an hour and 18 minutes late. She typed a message to the number Emily had given her. "I'm so sorry. I'm outside. The bus broke down in the rain. I completely understand if you already left. I'm so sorry." She stood there waiting for a response, rain falling on her phone screen, on her hands, on what remained of her dignity. She didn't get a text back. What she got instead was the sound of the restaurant door opening. And then there was a man standing in front of her. She registered him in pieces, the way you register something that doesn't quite fit the category you've prepared for it. He was tall, genuinely tall. The kind of tall that you notice even when you're not paying attention to height. He was wearing a black suit that was so precisely fitted it looked like it had been built directly onto his body. His hair was dark, and his jaw was the kind of jaw that looked like it had been set against something difficult and had won. His eyes were gray-green, and they were looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately name. Not irritation, not amusement, not the particular pity that she'd been bracing herself for. Something else. Something careful. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said. It came out smaller than she intended. "I'm Violet." He looked at her for a moment, just a moment, but it was the kind of moment that felt longer than a moment, and then he said, "I know." His voice was low and even, the voice of a man who was accustomed to rooms going quiet when he spoke. "I got your text," he said. "You didn't have to explain. You were waiting for over an hour." "I was." He said it simply without the edge she'd been expecting. "Are you cold?" She was cold. She was very cold. The rain was still coming down, and she was standing in it, and her teeth were about a minute away from chattering. "I'm fine," she said, because that was what she always said. He took off his jacket and held it out to her. She stared at it. "You'll ruin it," she said. "The rain." "It's a jacket," he said. "Take it." She took it. It was warm. It was the kind of warmth that came from someone who had been sitting in a heated restaurant for over an hour, and it settled around her shoulders like something had decided to go right tonight after all. "Shall we go inside?" he said. "Adrian," she said, because she wanted to confirm it, wanted to make sure she hadn't run through a rainstorm and ruined her shoes for the wrong stranger. "Yes," he said. "Okay," she said. "Okay, yes, let's go inside." She didn't know, walking through those doors beside him, that she'd handed her jacket to the man whose family name made federal agents lose sleep. She didn't know that the three men she'd briefly noticed near the entrance, men who were very still in the specific way that people who are paid to be still are still, were his security detail. She didn't know that when the maitre d' greeted Adrian by name and moved them to a corner table that had been held all evening, it wasn't because he was a regular customer. It was because nobody in that restaurant had any interest in finding out what happened when Adrian Moretti didn't get what he asked for. Violet sat down across from a man who was a stranger to her. She picked up the menu and tried to figure out if she should apologize again. She had no idea that her night, her entire life, really had just pivoted on an axis she couldn't see. The restaurant was called Savelli's, and it occupied the kind of quiet that money bought. Not silence exactly, but the muffled, cushioned version of the world that existed behind thick curtains and good carpeting and tables spaced far enough apart that conversations stayed private. Violet had walked past this block before without ever looking at the door, the way you learned not to look at things that clearly weren't for you. She was looking at it now from the inside, with rain drying in her hair and Adrian Moretti's jacket around her shoulders. "I'm sorry about," she started. "You said that already," Adrian said. "Not unkindly, just precisely." I mean about the way I look. I know this is—" She gestured vaguely at herself. Her soaked dress, her cracked heel, the state of her. "You look like someone who ran through the rain to get here," he said. "You were on time. I was an hour and 18 minutes late. The bus broke down. You still had to sit here alone for Violet." He said her name the way someone says something they've been practicing, careful with it, like they don't want to misplace it. "I waited because I chose to. Nobody made me stay." She looked at him across the table. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression from outside. Attentive, very still. Like he was studying something he found genuinely interesting and didn't want to rush. "Okay," she said. And she meant it as a full sentence. He almost smiled. She could tell because something shifted in his expression in a way that wasn't quite a smile, but suggested one was somewhere nearby. The waiter appeared and asked if they were ready, and Violet opened the menu and discovered that it was exactly the kind of menu she had feared, the kind where the items were described in 3 languages and the prices were not included. The implicit message being that if you needed to know the price, you probably shouldn't be here. She picked something that she recognized, pasta, because pasta was something she understood, and handed the menu back. Adrian ordered without looking at the menu. "You come here a lot," she said. "Sometimes. Is it good?" He considered this. "The food is good. The atmosphere is—" He paused. "It's a room full of people trying to look like they belong somewhere." She laughed. It surprised her. "Okay, that's actually a very specific observation." "It's an accurate one. Do you belong here?" He picked up his water glass. "I'm not sure belonging is the right way to think about it. How do you think about it?" He looked at her across the table, and again she had the feeling of being actually looked at, not assessed, not measured, but seen. "I own the building," he said. She put down her fork. "The restaurant," she said. "The building," he said. "The restaurant leases from the company." She didn't know what to do with that information. She filed it next to Emily's description, the gravity thing, and decided to let it sit for a minute. "And you still can't tell if the food is worth it," she said. "I didn't say that. I said the food is good. I said the atmosphere is full of people performing confidence they don't feel." "Are you performing?" He was quiet for a moment, long enough that she almost took the question back. "No," he said. "Not tonight." She believed him. She wasn't sure why she believed him. They had known each other for approximately 15 minutes. She was sitting in an expensive restaurant she'd never been able to afford, and she had a cracked heel and ruined hair, and she was wearing a stranger's jacket. But she believed him. Something about the way he said "not tonight," like he was admitting to the alternative without detailing it. "I'm a florist," she said, because she suddenly felt like she should offer him something in return. "Assistant florist, at a shop on Halsted. I've been there for 3 years, and I'm still— I don't know. It's not where I thought I'd be." "Where did you think you'd be?" "Somewhere with my own name on the door." She said it like she was testing whether it sounded stupid when she said it out loud. "I've wanted my own place since I was about 14. My mom used to get flowers from the grocery store sometimes when she was feeling okay about things, about the month, about money, and I used to rearrange them when I got home. Just sit there and rearrange them into something I thought was better." She thought it was funny. Was it funny? Probably. I was 14. She paused. "But I also think I was actually good at it." "Then it wasn't funny," he said. "It was just early." She looked at him. "You think so?" "I think most people who end up good at something were doing it at 14, and everyone around them thought it was a phase." She was quiet for a moment. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Something moved across his face, brief, controlled, then gone. "Maybe," he said. The food arrived, and she ate, and they talked. This was the part Violet hadn't expected. She had expected awkward silences. She had expected the particular stiffness of a blind date with someone who turned out to be wrong for you in ways you couldn't quite articulate. She had expected to spend the evening doing the math on how early she could leave without being rude. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected a man who listened, Actually listened, not in the performing attention way that she'd experienced on other dates, where the other person waited for you to finish, so they could redirect back to themselves, but in the way of someone who was taking in what she said and letting it change the conversation. She told him about Emily, about how they'd met in the waiting room of a hospital when Violet was 17 and her mother had broken her wrist, and Emily was there visiting her grandmother, and how they'd ended up talking for 2 hours and exchanging numbers, and how 17 years later, Emily was still the person she called when something went wrong, including tonight when she'd called her from the broken bus, and Emily had said, "He'll wait, trust me, he'll wait." She was right, Violet said. She usually right about things, Adrian asked. About everything except men. Her taste in men is catastrophically bad. She paused. No offense. Why would I take offense? She set us up. He was quiet for a moment. Then, she set you up with me. That's different. Is it? She wasn't dating me. Violet thought about that. Fair point. He told her in exchange about the car in his garage. Not a new car, he was very specific about that. A 1968 Charger that he'd been rebuilding for the past 2 years, a project he'd picked up from a man who had worked for his family and gotten too old to finish it. He described the work with a precision and quiet pleasure that was different from everything else about how he spoke, more open, less careful. Like this was something that didn't require the same management as everything else in his life. She had known immediately that this was a real thing, not a polished story he told at dinners to seem relatable, but something he actually went home to. What was his name? She asked. The man you got the car from. He paused. Tommy, he said. He worked for my family for 30 years. When he retired, he didn't really know what to do with himself. I kept visiting him. When he got sick, I made sure he had what he needed. She looked at him. That's normal, he said flatly. Almost like he was correcting her before she could say something he didn't want her to say. I was going to say kind, she said. He didn't respond to that. But something in his posture shifted just barely the way something does when it receives something unexpected and doesn't know what to do with it yet. They were on their second course when the evening's first serious disruption occurred. A man approached the table. He was heavy-set, expensive suit, the particular confidence of someone who had never once in his adult life been told he wasn't welcome somewhere. He came up to the table like he owned the right to interrupt, hand already extended toward Adrian. Moretti, the man said. His voice was too loud for the room. I didn't know you'd be here tonight. Adrian looked up. His expression did not change in any particular way, but Violet felt something, a shift in the atmosphere, the way you feel a change in pressure before a storm. Caruso, Adrian said. He did not stand. He did not take the extended hand. He looked at the man with an expression that was not unfriendly and not hostile, and somehow conveyed a complete and total absence of welcome. Caruso's hand stayed extended for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then he pulled it back. I just wanted to say hello, Caruso said. Hello, Adrian said. Silence. Caruso looked at Violet with the specific scrutiny of someone cataloging her for a file. She felt it, the look, the assessment. I'll let you enjoy your evening, Caruso said, and walked away. Violet waited until he was gone. Who was that? She said. A business acquaintance. He looked like he wanted to shake your hand, and you looked like you'd rather eat your own watch. Something crossed his face that was the closest thing to genuine amusement she'd seen from him yet. That's not an inaccurate description. Bad history. Business differences. She studied him. You're very careful with your words. Am I? Every answer you give is technically true and tells me nothing. He looked at her for a moment. Most people don't notice that. Most people aren't paying attention. She let it sit there. He picked up his wine glass, looked at it for a moment, set it down. Caruso is someone who made decisions that cost other people a great deal, and he is someone who expects that I have forgotten this. Have you? No, he said. Simply, And does he know you haven't forgotten? Yes, he said. Which is why he came over to try to pretend everything is fine. And is everything fine? He looked at her. No, he said. But it will be. She didn't know what that meant. She filed it next to the building next to the gravity thing. The waiter returned. Adrian declined dessert, and Violet asked if they had something with amaretto in it, because she had reached the stage of the evening where she was feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, something that she was nervous to name, and she thought it was better to have something sweet and delay the moment of having to acknowledge what it was. They had tiramisu with amaretto, and the waiter brought it with a kind of reverence that suggested it was very good, and it was. "Tell me something else about the flower shop," Adrian said. So she did. She told him about the way the shop smelled in the morning, all green and wet and alive, the specific smell of cut stems and fresh water that she sometimes caught randomly on ordinary days, and it made her feel like the shop was following her around. She told him about the regulars, Mr. Devereaux, who came in every Friday for a single white peony that he put on the kitchen table for his wife, even though his wife had been dead for 6 years, because she had loved white peonies. She told him about the 12-year-old girl who came in after school sometimes and asked to help arrange flowers, and who was going to be extraordinary at it if someone gave her the chance. She told him things she didn't usually tell people, not because she was performing, but because he kept asking, and the questions he asked were specific and real, and showed that he had actually heard the previous thing she said. At 10:30, she realized they had been in the restaurant for 3 hours. She looked at her phone. 3 missed calls from Emily. She typed quickly under the table. "Still here, don't call." 3 dots appeared. Then, "I knew it." She put her phone away. "I should probably get home," she said. Not because she wanted to, but because it was the responsible thing, and because something in her was afraid of what happened if this evening kept going. If she let herself want something, she was still not sure she had any right to want. "I'll have a car brought around," Adrian said. "You don't have to. It's late and it's still raining. I can take the bus." He looked at her with an expression that said with complete clarity and no aggression whatsoever, "Please stop doing that." She stopped doing that. They stood at the entrance while his car was pulled around. She was still wearing his jacket, and she started to take it off, and he said, "Keep it, I have others." Which was such a strange sentence, "I have others," that it should have felt arrogant, and instead felt like something else. Like a man describing a world so different from hers that he didn't even think to cushion the gap. She kept the jacket. At the door with the town car waiting and the rain still coming down and the evening trying to arrange itself into some kind of ending, she turned to him. "I really am sorry I was late," she said. "I know," he said. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." He looked at her for a moment. "Then next time, I'll pick you up." She felt something shift under her ribs. "Next time? If you want there to be a next time." She looked at him, this careful, quiet man who owned the building they were standing in and made rooms go still and gave away his jacket in the rain and listened like he was keeping inventory of everything she said. "Yeah," she said. "I want there to be a next time." "Then there will be." She got in the car. The driver was professional and quiet and took her home in a route that was faster than any bus could have managed. She sat in the back seat with Adrian's jacket around her shoulders and the tiramisu still warm in her memory. She texted Emily. "He waited an hour and 18 minutes and he didn't even make me feel bad about it." Emily texted back, "I told you. I told Beaumay." Violet looked out the window at Chicago sliding past in the rain and allowed herself, for the first time in a long time, the small and dangerous pleasure of hoping. What she did not know was that across the city, in an office that did not appear on any public business registry, her name was already being entered into a database. Not because she was a suspect, not because she had done anything wrong, but because she had been seen with Adrian Moretti, and in that world being seen with Adrian Moretti meant that you were now relevant to people who kept track of relevant things. She did not know about the database. She did not know about the 2 men who had photographed the entrance of the restaurant from across the street. She did not know that Caruso, the man who had approached the table, had made a phone call 20 minutes after leaving the restaurant. She did not know any of it. She was thinking about white peonies and a 1968 Charger and a man who had stood in the rain and given her his jacket. She was thinking about next time. She arrived home and unlocked her apartment door and hung Adrian's jacket on the hook by the door, still damp, carrying the faint smell of cedar and something else she couldn't name. She stood in her kitchen and made tea the way her mother had taught her. Loose leaves let it steep 4 minutes, not 3, and she thought about all the ways that evening could have gone differently. The bus could have arrived on time. She could have been early. She could have made a good impression. She could have walked in, put together, and collected. And maybe that version of the evening would have been fine. But she didn't think that version of the evening would have given her this. She didn't think the Adrian she'd met tonight, the one who looked at her from outside the restaurant while she was rain-soaked and apologizing before she'd even said hello, and didn't flinch, would have been the same man if she'd arrived on time and everything had been easy. She thought that maybe the rainstorm, the broken bus, the ruined shoes, all of it had stripped something away, had removed the performance of a first date and left something realer underneath. She thought that maybe what had happened was something very simple. 2 people had shown each other something true. She drank her tea. She called Emily. Emily said, "Tell me everything." And Violet talked for 40 minutes straight. Afterward, in bed in the dark with the rain still going outside and Adrian's jacket on the hook by the door, she felt the thing she'd been afraid to name. She felt hopeful. It was the most terrifying thing she'd felt in years, because hope, Violet knew from long experience, required you to care about the outcome. And caring about the outcome meant that the outcome could hurt you. But she felt it anyway. She lay in the dark, and she felt it anyway. And somewhere across the city in a car moving through the same rain, Adrian Moretti sat in the back seat and looked at his phone and thought about a woman who had run through a rainstorm and apologized for it and worn his jacket without arguing about it for longer than 30 seconds and told him about white peonies and a 12-year-old girl with natural talent and 30-year dreams about a door with her name on it. He thought about the way she'd said after he mentioned Tommy, "I was going to say kind." He thought about how long it had been since anyone had said that about him, how long it had been since he'd let anyone close enough to notice. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. A name he recognized. A message in 3 words that changed the temperature of the car. He read it twice. He looked out the window at the rain. He put the phone face down on the seat beside him. He would deal with it. He always dealt with it. But for the first time in years, he wished with a quiet and private intensity that there was nothing to deal with. That it could just be dinner. That it could just be her. He had told himself it was one dinner. That was the rule he set in the car on the way home. One dinner, a clean evening. Something simple that wouldn't complicate anything. He had agreed to the blind date as a favor to someone who owed him a different kind of favor. And he had expected to sit through 90 minutes of careful conversation with a woman who would spend the whole evening trying to figure out what he was worth. He had expected to be polite and distant and to leave feeling exactly the same as when he arrived. He had not expected Violet Bennett. He had not expected someone who showed up soaked and cracked-heeled and apologizing before she'd even said hello, and then sat across from him for 3 hours and never once asked about his money. Adrian Moretti had met a great many people in his life. He had met people who wanted things from him: money, protection, access, fear. He had met people who pretended they didn't want things and then revealed themselves slowly over the course of weeks or months. He had become very good over the years at identifying the moment when a person's real agenda surfaced. He watched for it the way other people watched the weather. With Violet, the moment never came. She talked about flowers. She talked about her mother and about Emily, and about a 12-year-old girl who came into the shop after school and had a gift for arrangement that nobody had bothered to cultivate yet. She talked about what the shop smelled like in the morning, and about Mr. Devereaux and his white peonies, and she said things that were real and unpolished in the way that things are when someone isn't thinking about how they sound. She had called him kind. He lay awake for a long time that night thinking about that. He was not kind. He had never described himself that way, and he would have been skeptical of anyone else who did. He was strategic. He was fair in the specific way that fairness functions as a tool, because unpredictability was expensive and trust was a currency that compounded. He protected people who were loyal to him, and he dealt decisively with people who weren't. That was not kindness. That was management. But she had said it like she meant it, and he had not known what to do with it. He dealt with the message on his phone at 2 a.m. in the way he dealt with most things, quietly, efficiently, without drama. A series of calls, a set of instructions, confirmation that the problem was being handled. He put the phone down at 3 and tried to sleep and mostly failed. At 6 a.m. he was already in the garage. The charger was where he'd left it, half-assembled, patient. He worked on it when other things were too loud. He had explained this to exactly no one before last night. He pulled a wrench from the drawer and thought about the way she'd asked, "Was it funny?" And the answer he'd given her, "Not funny, just early," which was something he believed about most things in life and had never had occasion to say out loud. He thought about the cracked heel of her shoe, the way she'd been ready to leave before she'd even gone inside, sure he wasn't there. Sure the evening was over before it started. She was accustomed to being let down. He had recognized it, the practiced acceptance of it, the apology reflex that kicked in automatically. He wondered who had taught her to be that way. At 8 a.m. his phone rang. He wiped his hands on a cloth and picked up. It was Marco, his second, the man who managed the space between what Adrian decided and what actually happened. "The Caruso situation," Marco said. "I know. He's moving faster than we expected. He made contact with the DeLuca people last night." "I know that too." A pause. "You want me to arrange a conversation?" "Not yet." "Adrian." "Marco." He said it flat and even, which was the tone that closed the subject. "Not yet. I'm thinking." He hung up. He stood in the garage with the charger, and he thought about two separate things at the same time. The way he had trained himself to do the Caruso problem on one track, efficient and analytical sorting options and outcomes, and on the other track, quieter and less organized, the question of whether it was too early to text her. He picked up his phone at 9:30 and sent, "The tiramisu was better than I expected. I hope the shoes are salvageable." He put the phone face down. It rang 40 seconds later. He picked up. "The shoes are absolutely not salvageable," Violet said, and he could hear from her voice that she was smiling. "I'm treating it as a loss and moving forward. I can... If you're about to offer to replace them, don't." He had been about to offer to replace them. "Why not?" "Because they're shoes, and I'm a grown person and it was raining. That's not your fault." "It was my invitation. It was Emily's blind date. You're innocent." A pause. "How are you calling me? I didn't give you my number." "Emily gave it to me," he said. "When I called to ask." Silence on the line. Then, "You called Emily this morning to get my number." "Yes." "What did she say?" "She said, and I'm quoting directly, 'It's about time.'" Violet laughed. It was a real laugh, involuntary, not performed, the kind that comes out before the person has decided whether to let it. He had been cataloging her sounds since last night, and he added this one. "That sounds like her," Violet said. "Sorry about Emily." "Don't be. I liked her." "You talked to her for what, 3 minutes?" "Long enough." She was quiet for a moment. He could hear movement, the sound of her in her kitchen, something being set down on a counter. "Are you always like this?" she said. "Like what?" "Decisive. You move fast." "When I know what I want," he said. "I don't see the advantage in waiting." She didn't answer immediately. He let the silence sit. He had learned that silence was something most people felt compelled to fill, and what they filled it with told you more than anything they'd planned to say. "I'm working today," she said finally. "The shop is open until 6. "I know. You can't just..." "I'm not suggesting I show up at the shop. I'm telling you, I know you have to work." "Oh." A pause. "Okay. Are you free Saturday?" Yes, I'm free Saturday. Good, he said. I'll pick you up this time. 7 o'clock. You don't have to? Violet. She stopped. Let me pick you up, he said. Just that. Nothing complicated about it. She was quiet. Then, okay, 7. He hung up and stood in the garage for a moment longer. Then he picked up the wrench and got back to work. Saturday came with the particular clarity of a Chicago October morning that had decided to be beautiful for once. Cold and bright and sharp-edged, the kind of day that made the city look like it had been cleaned overnight. Violet spent most of it in the shop, rearranging a delivery of late-season dahlias, and trying not to think about the evening, which was a project she was completely failing at. Emily called at 2 in the afternoon. Tell me everything, Emily said without preamble. I already know he called me for your number this morning, which I have decided means he's either extremely confident or extremely smitten. Possibly both. Probably both. I don't know what he is, Violet said honestly. She was trimming stems over the work sink. He's not like anyone I've ever been on a date with. Meaning good or bad? Meaning I genuinely can't tell yet. She tried to find the word. He's very still. Like everything he says is something he decided to say. Like there isn't anything accidental about him. That sounds exhausting. It's not actually. She paused. It makes you feel like when he says something, he means it. Emily was quiet for a second. Violet, babe, are you already in trouble? No. You just described the most attractive quality possible to you specifically and then denied being in trouble. Emily, I'm just saying, you've always wanted a man who means what he says. That's your whole thing. That's been your thing since Marcus. Violet didn't want to talk about Marcus. Marcus was 3 years ago and had been exactly the opposite. A man who said everything beautifully and meant approximately none of it, which she had discovered over 18 months of increasingly elaborate rationalizations. This is different, she said. Yes, and that's what I'm saying. Violet, be careful, but also be open. Those two things are in direct opposition. That's kind of the whole point of being a person, Emily said. And then her other line rang, and she said she had to go and hung up, which was the most Emily thing possible. Violet put down her pruning shears and looked at the dahlias. Be careful. Be open. She thought about the way he'd waited. An hour and 18 minutes in a restaurant he owned the building of, and he hadn't left. He'd come outside to find her. He'd given her his jacket. She thought about Tommy and the charger, about the way his voice changed when he talked about it, less managed, more real. She thought about, I have others, and the gap it described without meaning to. She picked up her shears and got back to work. He picked her up at 7, exactly. Not 7:02, not 6:58. 7. The town car pulled up as she was coming down the stairs of her building, and she stopped on the bottom step because he was already standing outside the car. He'd gotten out, which she hadn't expected. Which did something to her chest that she was not going to overthink. He was wearing a dark gray jacket over a black shirt. He looked, as he had on Thursday, like someone who existed in a different register of the world, more deliberate, more present, like gravity worked slightly differently in his vicinity. You're punctual, she said. I told you 7. Most people treat time like a suggestion. I don't, he said. He opened the car door. She got in. He took her to a different restaurant this time. Not Savelli's, not the expensive hush of money performing itself, but a small Italian place in Lincoln Park that had red checkered tablecloths and photographs on the walls and smelled like garlic and Sunday afternoons. The kind of place where a regular could walk in and have their order started before they sat down. The host, a man with gray at his temples and flour on his apron, lit up when he saw Adrian. Moretti, he said, and the warmth in it was completely unperformed. You brought someone. Nico, Adrian said and shook his hand. This is Violet. Nico looked at her with the frank appraisal of someone who knew Adrian well enough to have opinions. Violet, he said. Beautiful name. He looked back at Adrian. She can come back. That's not his decision, Violet said pleasantly. Nico stared at her for half a second and then erupted into laughter. I like her? He said to Adrian, pointing for emphasis. I like her immediately. Adrian had the expression of a man who was working to conceal something. He mostly succeeded. They were seated at a corner table. Not the prominent corner of a room that announced someone, the quiet corner, the one in back, the one that kept you out of the center of things. You come here more than Savelli's, she said. It wasn't a question. How can you tell? Nico, the way he said your name. Adrian picked up the menu, which was a single laminated card. I've known him for 20 years. He worked for my family. Doing what? A slight pause. Various things. He wanted to open a restaurant. I helped him do it. She looked at him. That was kind of you. His jaw tightened just slightly. Stop saying that. Which part? That word. Applied to me. She tilted her head. Why? Because it's... He stopped, set the menu down, looked at her with the directness that she was beginning to understand was just how he looked at things when he wasn't bothering to manage them. Because people who know me would find it amusing. Do you care what people who know you find amusing? Not particularly. Then it doesn't matter what they think, she said. I call what I see. He was quiet. She opened her menu. What's good here? He told her. She ordered the braised short rib because it sounded honest, the kind of food that didn't try to be anything other than what it was. He ordered pasta, the same dish every time, because that was the kind of man he was. They were halfway through their appetizers when she said, Tell me about your family. She felt the air change. Not dramatically, he was too controlled for dramatic, but it was there. What do you want to know? He said. Whatever you'd tell someone you're getting to know. My father passed 7 years ago, he said. My mother is... He considered his words. Retired. She lives outside the city. I have one sister, Elena. She's 32. She teaches high school English in Evanston. And the business? What about it? You said at dinner Thursday that you own the building. What kind of business? He looked at her. Various investments, property, some import and distribution. That's... She paused. That's quite a range. It is. Are you always that vague about it? Yes. Why? He picked up his fork. Because most of the details are boring. She had the distinct feeling that the details were the opposite of boring, and that this was exactly the reason he described them that way. She filed it. She had a growing file on Adrian Moretti, and she was becoming aware that it was going to take a long time to read. Elena, she said, moving on deliberately. Is she older or younger than you? Younger by 6 years. Close. Something warmed in his expression. Not much, but enough. Yes. She know about me. He paused. She knows there was a dinner. And what did she say about that? He was quiet for a moment. Then, she asked if I'd managed not to be terrifying. Violet laughed. Had you? I don't know. You'd have to answer that. She considered him across the table. The stillness, the precision, the careful way he occupied space. The jacket he'd given her without making it a thing. The way he'd listened. You weren't terrifying, she said. You were... She thought about it. You were a lot, but not terrifying. A lot. Like trying to read in a second language, like you have to pay attention in a different way than usual. He was quiet for a second. Then, that might be the most accurate thing anyone said about me. Has nobody ever said anything accurate about you? Not recently. That's... She stopped, reconsidered. Actually, that sounds lonely. He looked at her. She had the feeling she'd said something that landed somewhere he hadn't prepared for. I manage, he said. I didn't say you didn't. I said it sounds lonely. He picked up his wine. Said nothing. but his hand, she noticed, was not quite as relaxed around the glass as it had been a moment ago. She let it go. She talked about her week instead. A massive order for a tech company's office renovation. 300 arrangements, the kind of order that was good for business and brutal for her back. She talked about the 12-year-old whose name was Cora, who had come in on Wednesday and spent an hour rearranging the sample vases in the window display and produced something genuinely beautiful, with tulips and rosemary that stopped 3 people on the street. She doesn't know she's talented, Violet said. That's the thing about kids who are talented, they think everyone can do what they do. You have to show them that everyone can't. What did you tell her? I told her that when I open my own shop, I want her to design the window displays. She's 12. I didn't say right now, I said when. She paused. Which I realize sounds a little delusional, given that I don't have a shop, I don't have the capital, and I've been saying when for about 8 years now. Why don't you have the capital? She looked at him. Because capital requires saving, and saving requires surplus, and surplus is... She made a gesture with her fork that communicated the absence of surplus. Your family, he said. Not a question. My mother's health has been up and down. My younger brother Marcus different. Marcus needed help with school. She paused. I don't say that like it's a hardship. They're my family. I wanted to help them, but it means that the flower shop account has been... She made the fork gesture again. Slowly accumulating. How much would you need? She put her fork down. Adrian, I'm curious. I'm not going to tell you how much it would cost to open my shop. Why not? Because it's not something I'm asking you for. I'm not telling you about the shop because I want you to solve it. I'm telling you about it because you asked about my life. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once and picked up his pasta. Okay, he said. She waited for him to push back. He didn't. Okay, she said. You said you're not asking. I'm not offering. He paused. But I want you to know that you'll have it. The shop. Not because of me, because you'll figure it out. She looked at him across the red checkered tablecloth. You don't know that, she said. I've been watching how you talk about it for 2 evenings now, he said. You don't talk about it like a dream. You talk about it like a plan that's taking longer than expected. She was quiet. There's a difference, he said. Not everyone has that. She looked at him and felt something move through her that she was not going to name yet. Not yet. It was too early, and she was too careful, and she had been burned by the mistake of naming things too early before. But she felt it. Dinner ran long again. Nico brought them dessert they hadn't ordered and refused to take it back. The cannoli were excellent. Violet told Adrian about her mother's recipe, which was the genuine Italian version and not the American version that put chocolate chips in the filling, which her mother had strong opinions about. Adrian said his mother made something similar and that she would probably have identical opinions about the chocolate chips, and Violet laughed and said that maybe they should meet, and then immediately said, "That's sorry, that was." And Adrian said, "Don't apologize," quietly enough that she stopped. They left at 10. He walked her to her door. At the top of the stairs, she turned. He was 1 step below her, which put them nearly at eye level. This is the part, she said, where I say I had a good time. Did you? Yes, I genuinely did. She paused. I keep waiting for it to get weird, and it doesn't. Should it? In my experience, things that seem good get weird when you find out the thing you didn't know yet. He was quiet for a moment. Something moved through his expression, brief, controlled, but there. There will be things, he said, that you don't know yet. She looked at him. Is that a warning? It's honesty. Okay, she said. I appreciate that. Do you? Yes. Because most people wait until they have to tell you. The fact that you're telling me there's something to know that's different. He looked at her for a long moment. You're... He stopped. I'm what? He shook his head very slightly. Unexpected, he said. She almost made a joke about it. She stopped herself. Good night, Adrian, she said. Good night, Violet. She unlocked her door. He waited until she was inside. She heard him go down the stairs. She stood in her kitchen and put her hands flat on the counter and breathed. Be careful. Be open. She thought about there will be things. About the way he'd said it, not evasive, not performing. The way you say something when you mean it, and aren't sure what the other person is going to do with it. She thought about the Caruso man, and the way the room had shifted. About the security detail she'd clocked both nights, now one near the entrance, one near the car, positioned in ways that you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention. She was paying attention. She was not sure what she was paying attention to, but it was something. She picked up her phone and called Emily. Emily answered on the first ring. Well? He said there will be things I don't know yet. Silence. Emily. I heard you. I'm processing. A pause. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. He didn't say it in a bad way. He said it like honesty. Like he was flagging something. So he has secrets. Everyone has secrets. Violet, sweetheart. Most guys' secrets are, I still play video games at 35, or I voted for that guy once. This man said, he didn't say what it was. But you're going to keep seeing him. She thought about it. About the cannoli and the red checkered tablecloth, and Nico saying, I like her immediately. About the way he'd said, you'll have it not as a gift, but as a certainty. Yes, she said. I'm going to keep seeing him. Emily exhaled. Okay. Be careful. I know. And Violet. Be open. I know. She hung up. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and thought about there will be things. In the following 3 weeks, she found out what some of those things were. The first thing was small. She asked him once what the imported goods were the import and distribution arm of his various investments, and he said, machinery components, industrial parts, things that moved between countries on cargo manifests. And the answer was technically complete, and she could feel the shape of what it wasn't saying. She didn't push. Not yet. The second thing was the security. She had noticed the still positioned men on the first date. By the third date, she had counted them never less than 3, always distributed in a pattern that covered exits. Adrian introduced none of them. They operated as if invisible, which she suspected was the point. On the third date, a Friday evening at a jazz bar in the South Loop, she said to him during a break between sets, the man by the door, and the 2 near the bar, they're with you. He looked at her without surprise. Yes. How long have you had security? A long time. Is it? She tried to find the right word. Is it necessary? Yes, he said, flat, clear, no hedging. Because of the business. Yes. She looked at him. Is anyone in danger? He looked back at her. Not right now. She processed that. Not right now was not the same as no. Okay, she said. He waited. That's it, he said. That's it, she said. For now. Something moved across his face. Something that she was learning to identify the specific micro-expression that meant he had expected something else, and she had done the other thing. He picked up his glass. The band started again. They listened to the music for a while, in the particular comfortable quiet that she had not expected to find with a man she'd only known for 3 weeks. The third thing happened on a Tuesday. It wasn't a date. She was working at the shop alone, late a rush order for a funeral that had come in at 4 in the afternoon, and she'd stayed to complete it rather than leave it for tomorrow. She had her hands full of white lilies when the door opened. It was a woman she had never seen before. Early 40s, dark hair, the particular composure of someone accustomed to entering rooms where they were not expected. Violet Bennett, the woman said. Violet put down the lilies. Yes, my name is Daria Savell. She paused. I work with certain investigative bodies, federal. Violet's hands went still. I don't want to alarm you, the woman said quickly. You're not in any trouble. I want to be clear about that. What do you want? Violet said. I want to ask you about Adrian Moretti. The shop felt suddenly very quiet. I don't know what you think I could tell you, Violet said. We've been on 3 dates. I know, Daria Savell said. I know exactly what you've done and where you've been. She said it without menace, almost gently, which was in some ways worse. The Moretti family has been of interest to us for a number of years. Adrian Moretti specifically. For what? The Moretti organization's history is long and the current structure is... She paused. Complicated. We believe Adrian Moretti is trying to separate himself from certain aspects of the family's operations. We also believe there are people in and around that world who want to make sure that doesn't happen. Violet's heart was doing something loud and specific inside her chest. And me, she said. We're concerned about your safety, Daria said. And we want you to understand what you may be walking into. Which is what? Daria looked at her for a moment. There's a man named Caruso, she said. Does that name mean anything to you? Violet thought about the restaurant. The heavy man in the expensive suit. The extended hand that Adrian hadn't taken. The phone call she hadn't been meant to notice. I've heard the name, she said carefully. Caruso has been building alliances with another organization, the DeLuca family out of New York. Daria paused. They intend to make a move against Adrian Moretti, and anyone in Adrian's immediate orbit is at risk of being used as leverage. The word leverage landed somewhere cold and heavy. You're telling me I'm in danger, Violet said. I'm telling you that you could be, Daria said. And I'm telling you that you have a choice about whether to continue putting yourself in a position where that's possible. Violet looked at her hands. The lilies on the counter, the shop that smelled like green things and fresh water. What do you want from me? She said. Nothing, Daria said. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm asking you to be informed. And if I choose to keep seeing him, Daria looked at her steadily. Then we would hope you'd be careful and stay in contact. Stay in contact, Violet repeated. With the FBI. With people who are trying to make sure this situation resolves without casualties. Violet was quiet for a long moment. Is he dangerous? She said. Adrian. Not the people around him. Him specifically. Daria was quiet for a second, choosing. He's not someone who hurts people for pleasure, she said finally. He's someone who was born into a structure that demanded certain things of him, and who has been over the past several years attempting to dismantle that structure, quietly, carefully, with more success than most people who try and more resistance than he expected. That's not an answer to my question. No, Daria said. It isn't. She handed Violet a card, a name, a number. Nothing else. Think about it, she said. Be careful. She left. Violet stood alone in the shop with the lilies and the smell of fresh water and a business card in her hand. She stood there for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. She didn't call Adrian. She called Emily. Emily answered immediately because Emily answered immediately at all hours. Something happened, Violet said. I need you to come to the shop. I'm on my way, Emily said without asking a single question. That was why Violet thought 17 years later, Emily was still the person she called. She put the card in her apron pocket and finished the funeral arrangement with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. She had always been good at holding still, but it was getting harder. Emily arrived 22 minutes after the call, still wearing her coat, from the cold outside, out of breath like she'd walked fast the whole way. She took one look at Violet's face and didn't say anything clever. She just came behind the counter and stood next to her shoulder to shoulder the way she had in hospital waiting rooms, and through bad news, and through the particular silence that follows things you don't have words for yet. Tell me, Emily said. So Violet told her. All of it. The woman named Daria Savell, the federal investigation, the name Caruso, the word leverage. She told it straight through without editorializing, the way she'd learned to deliver hard information flat and clear so that the weight of it could be felt without the drama of it getting in the way. Emily listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Emily. When Violet finished, Emily picked up the business card from the counter and looked at it. Then she set it down. "Okay," Emily said. "Okay. I mean, not okay, obviously, but okay. We can work with information." "Can we?" Violet said. "Because I'm standing here with a federal agent's card in my apron pocket, and the funeral flowers I just finished for someone I don't know, and I'm trying to figure out what I actually know about this man I've been seeing for 3 weeks, and the answer is..." She stopped. "The answer is, I know he listens. I know he waited in the rain. I know he has a 1968 Charger in his garage that he works on when things are loud. I know he knows a man named Nico who's known him for 20 years and lit up when he walked in the door. That's what I know." "That's actually quite a bit," Emily said quietly. "Emily, he runs," she said the word, "organization." She also said he's trying to dismantle it. She said she believed he was trying. That's different. Emily was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" Violet looked at the lilies on the counter. "I don't know yet." "Are you going to tell him she came?" She hadn't decided that yet either. She picked up the business card and looked at it again, and then put it in her pocket. "I don't know," she said. "Not tonight." "Violet, I need to think first. I can't talk to him about something this big when I'm still..." She made a gesture at herself, at the state of her, at the lilies and the shop and the cold evening and everything she hadn't finished processing. "I need to get through tonight." Emily looked at her for a long moment. Then she picked up the remaining lilies and started arranging them. "Then let's finish the funeral flowers," Emily said. "And then we'll get something to eat and you can think out loud until it makes sense." This was why Violet thought for the second time that evening Emily was still her person after 17 years. She picked up her shears. She finished the arrangement. She thought about holding still. She spent the next 2 days doing what she always did when she was working through something she didn't know how to resolve yet. She threw herself into the shop. She came in early and left late. She took on the extra orders, the difficult clients, the elaborate requests that required all of her attention. She rearranged the front display twice. She spent an hour teaching Cora, who had come in on Wednesday after school again, how to condition tulip stems so they lasted longer. Cora was wearing a yellow rain jacket and had her hair in 2 braids and the serious concentration of a child who had decided this was important. "Why does cutting them underwater help?" Cora asked. "Because when you cut a stem in the air, the flower sucks in air instead of water," Violet said. "And once air gets in, it blocks the water from rising. You can't reverse it." Cora considered this. "So you have to do it right the first time. Or you can try to recut them, but it's harder to fix once air's gotten in." Cora looked at the tulip in her hand. "Like some mistakes," she said in the matter-of-fact way that 12-year-olds occasionally say profound things. Violet looked at her. "Yeah," she said. "Exactly like that." She thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. Adrian texted on Wednesday evening, thinking about Saturday. A question mark. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed, "Still on. See you at 7. She put her phone down, picked it up again, typed, "There's something I want to talk to you about. Not over text." She sent it. 3 minutes passed. His reply was, "I know. There are things I want to tell you too." She stared at that for a very long time. Then she put her phone face down on her kitchen counter and made tea and stood at her window and looked at the city for a while and tried to decide what kind of person she wanted to be about this. She had 2 choices as best she could see them. She could pull back. She could use the information that Daria Savell had handed her like a warning flag and exit cleanly before anything got complicated enough to hurt. She could return the jacket, she still had the jacket, and tell him she'd thought about it, and she didn't think they were right for each other, and that would be true enough to say, without lying, and she could go back to the version of her life that was smaller and safer, and didn't involve federal agents visiting her workplace. Or she could show up Saturday. She could show up Saturday and look him in the eye and have the conversation that "there is something I want to talk to you about" implied, and she could listen to whatever. "There are things I want to tell you too" actually meant, and she could decide after that. She thought about the word leverage. She thought about Caruso and the way Adrian had looked at him, not with anger, but with the particular flatness of a man who had been keeping score for a long time. She thought about a man who waited an hour and 18 minutes in the rain, who said I was going to say kind about someone who paid for an old man's medical care, who said not tonight when she asked him if he was performing. She thought about the specific quality of his honesty, the way he said there will be things I don't know yet. The way he didn't pretend the gap between his world and hers was smaller than it was. She thought about Tommy and the charger. She made her decision somewhere around the bottom of her second cup of tea. She showed up Saturday. He picked her up at 7, exactly same as always, already standing outside the car when she came down the stairs. He was in a dark coat tonight, the cold having fully arrived in Chicago, the way it always did suddenly, without negotiation. His expression when he saw her was the careful one, the reading one, and she understood that he had been doing his own version of the past 2 days. They got in the car. He didn't take her to a restaurant. He took her to the garage. She understood when the car pulled up that this was intentional, not a default, not a plan that fell through. He had brought her to the thing he didn't usually show people. The charger was there in the state she'd imagined from his descriptions, more complete now than it would have been a month ago, she suspected, because he worked on it when things were loud, and things had been loud. The garage smelled like motor oil and metal, and the wood of old workbenches. There were tools arranged with the specific precision of someone who found order in mechanical things. She looked at the car for a moment. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's not finished," he said. "It's already beautiful." He stood next to her, and they both looked at the car for a moment in the way that two people stand next to something, a third thing, when there are other things that need to be said, and neither person has found the right entrance yet. Then he said, "You got a visitor." She looked at him. "Daria Savell," he said. "Tuesday evening at the shop." She didn't ask how he knew. She was past asking how he knew things. "Yes," she said. "What did she tell you?" "What do you think she told me?" He was quiet for a moment. The Caruso situation, the DeLuca connection. The word leverage probably came up. It did. "And you still came tonight?" "I did." He turned to look at her. The garage light was unforgiving, and she could see all of it in his face. The control, and underneath the control, something that was working hard not to show how much her presence in that garage mattered to him. "Why?" he said. "Because you said there were things you wanted to tell me," she said, "and I wanted to hear them from you." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he moved to the workbench and leaned against it, and she understood this was his version of settling in the garage, the tools, the car, the things he understood. "My grandfather built the organization," he said, "in the 50s. He came here from Sicily with $40 and a set of skills that were useful in a city that didn't ask too many questions back then. He built something. Real estate eventually. Import routes. Relationships with the right people." A pause. "And the wrong ones." She was quiet. She didn't fill the silence. "My father inherited it and expanded it. By the time I was 20, I understood what it was, all of it, not the version you tell children. I understood what the family name carried." He stopped. "I made choices. Some of them I'd make differently now." "What kind of choices?" He looked at her directly. "Choices that kept things running, that kept people in line, that protected what we'd built." She held his gaze. "Did you hurt people?" "I put fear into people," he said, "when I needed to. There's a difference between that and some things are a line I didn't cross. Other people in the family crossed it. I made sure it wasn't me." She believed him. She wasn't sure she should believe him that quickly, but she did. "And now," she said, 4 years ago I started moving things. Quietly. Transitioning the legitimate businesses, real estate, the import company, the building holdings into structures that stand on their own without the rest of it, cutting the money clean, cutting the relationships that couldn't be made clean. And Caruso. Caruso managed certain relationships between our organization and people in New York and further south. He made himself essential to both sides. When I started pulling back, he lost the middle position that made him valuable. His jaw was set. He doesn't like losing a position. Daria Savell said he's building alliances with the DeLuca family. Yes. To come after you. Yes. She absorbed this. The garage was quiet. Somewhere outside, a car passed. And me, she said. Where do I fit into this? His expression changed in a way that was different from anything she'd seen from him before. Not the controlled remove, not the careful stillness. Something underneath all of that. Something that was being allowed to surface. You don't fit into it, he said. That's the problem. You're the one part of my life right now that has nothing to do with any of this, and that makes you visible in a way that... He stopped. That worries me. You're telling me I'm in danger because I'm with you. I'm telling you that there are people who watch who I see, and that Caruso has already noted that I left Savelli's with someone 3 weeks ago. He paused. His people were outside. She thought about the 2 men she hadn't been supposed to notice, the photographs she hadn't known were being taken. So they know about me, she said. They know your name, he said. They know where you work. The cold that moved through her wasn't from the garage. What does that mean? She said. Practically. What does it mean that they know? It means that if Caruso decides to put pressure on me, he has identified a point of leverage. He said the word the same way Daria had said it, which told her that it was the right word and that he knew it. And what are you doing about it? I have people watching the shop, he said. I have had people watching the shop since Tuesday. She stared at him. Since Tuesday? Before you told me. I acted first. I'm telling you now. Adrian? I know, he said. His voice was flat and direct, and something underneath it that she recognized after a moment as self-recrimination. I should have told you sooner. He stopped, started again. I was trying to figure out how much you needed to know and how fast. All of it, she said. As fast as possible. That's how much I need to know. He looked at her. I'm not someone who needs to be managed, she said. I've been managing hard information my whole life. My mother's health, my family's money, the shop, everything. Don't decide what I can handle. Tell me and I'll decide. Something moved through him. She could see it. You're right, he said. Just that. No deflection, no rerouting. You're right. She exhaled. Okay, she said. So tell me everything. He told her. It took an hour and a half, and they moved from the garage to the small kitchen off the back of the house she hadn't been inside before, and it was the kind of kitchen that showed you who lived there. Clean, functional, a single coffee cup in the drying rack, a notepad on the counter covered in numbers that she didn't look at. He made coffee without asking if she wanted any, which she appreciated, and they sat at the table, and he laid it out. The Moretti organization as it currently existed, the legitimate holdings which were substantial and entirely clean, and the remaining legacy relationships, which were 3 in number, and which he was in the process of severing. Caruso was not one of the 3 remaining. Caruso had been formally cut 8 months ago, which was the source of the animosity. The DeLuca family out of New York was not an organization Adrian had any direct relationship with, which made Caruso's alliance with them a purely aggressive move. Not business, but retaliation. What does Caruso want? She said. He wants me to reinstate him, to restore the relationships he profited from. And if you don't, he wants to make the cost of not doing so high enough that I'll reconsider. By using me. By making me feel the consequences of my choices in a personal way. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. What would that look like, practically? He was quiet for a moment. He would try to frighten you, to put you in a position where I would see that you were in danger and make a decision based on that, rather than on what I've been building. And what would you do, she said, if he did that? He looked at her. I would remove the threat. How? By being very clear about the consequences of touching what's mine. The word mine landed differently than it might have 3 weeks ago. Not possessive in the way of controlling. Possessive in the way of protecting. The difference was real, and she knew it. I need you to understand something, she said. I'm not going to be someone who stays home and waits to be safe. That's not who I am. I know. So if there's danger, then we figure it out together, he said. That's why I'm telling you. Not because I've decided for you. Because I want you in the decision. She looked at him for a long moment. When did that change, she said. From managing to telling me. When I realized that managing you was both impossible and wrong, he said. About 45 seconds into this conversation. She almost smiled. That's annoyingly self-aware. I have my moments. She set down her coffee cup. Okay, so what do we do? He had a plan. Of course he had a plan. He was the kind of man who had contingencies for his contingencies, who thought 3 moves ahead, the way other people breathed. The plan involved cooperation with Daria Savel's team, which he had in fact been in communication with for 6 months already. A fact that surprised her until she thought about it, and then didn't surprise her at all. Because of course he was. It involved accelerating the separation of the last 3 legacy relationships. And it involved keeping Violet's movements varied and unpredictable for a period of weeks, with his security team maintaining a presence she wouldn't necessarily see. I don't love the surveillance, she said. I know. But I understand it. For now, he said. It's temporary. She nodded. She looked at her hands on the table. She was thinking specifically about Daria Savel's card in her apron pocket and about what it meant that Adrian was already in contact with the same people. About the particular shape of a man who was trying to clean something dirty, and the time it took to do that, and the friction it created. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. When you first agreed to the blind date when Emily set this up, did you know who she was? Did you know anything about me beforehand? He was quiet for a moment. I had your name, he said. And your employer. My people check backgrounds on anyone who's being connected to me by a mutual contact. He paused. It's a precaution. So you knew I was safe. I knew you had no connection to anyone in any of this. Yes. And that's all you knew. That's all I knew. She processed this. And now that you know me, actually know me. Does any part of this feel like... She stopped and tried again. Was any of this the dinners, the conversations, the things you told me about Tommy and the charger? Was any of it about keeping me close because I was useful somehow? She didn't want to say it. She said it. As a distraction, a cover, something that looked normal. The silence that followed was about 3 seconds long. 3 very precise, very weighted seconds. No, he said. And then, look at me. She looked at him. No, he said again. And she could see it, the openness she hadn't seen in him before, the thing that was usually managed and wasn't being managed right now. I have not made my life easy by knowing you. I've made it considerably more complicated. If this were about strategy, you would have been exactly the wrong choice. She held his gaze. I know, she said. I think I needed to hear you say it. Then I'll say it again. None of this was strategy. You are the most. He stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. She waited. He said quietly, and with the particular difficulty of a man who did not say this kind of thing often. You're the most honest person I've been around in a very long time, and that matters to me in a way I didn't expect it to. She was quiet. Okay, she said. Okay. He looked at her. That's it? That's enough, she said. For tonight. She stayed another hour, not because there was more to resolve, but because the conversation had opened something, and she didn't want to leave it too quickly. They talked about Elena, his sister, who had apparently texted him 3 times in the past week, wanting to know how the florist was, which was the most human thing she'd heard about his life yet. She told him about her brother, the other Marcus, who was finishing his last year of school and had called her crying 2 weeks ago because he was afraid he wasn't good enough. And she'd talked him through it for 90 minutes the way she always talked people through things. "You do that a lot," he said. "Talk people through things. Is it obvious?" "You have the voice for it," he said. "Like you've decided in advance that the person is going to be okay and you're just helping them get there." She thought about that. "My mother used to say that. She sounds like someone worth knowing." "She is," Violet said. She stopped. He looked at her. "I was going to say, you'd like her," she said. "And then I thought maybe that's moving too fast." "I told you about Tommy," he said. "You told me about your mother. I don't think introducing the concept of a person is too fast." She looked at him. "You're unexpectedly reasonable about some things, and unexpectedly unreasonable about others. I'm learning the ratio." He drove her home at midnight. She didn't invite him up, not because she didn't want to, but because it was the right pace, and they both seemed to understand that without saying it. At the bottom of her stairs, she turned. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "I want to be clear about that. Not because of Caruso. Not because of the security or the federal agents or any of it." "Why then?" "Because you showed me the charger," she said. "And you told me about Tommy. And you said not tonight on the first date, which is the most honest thing anybody's said to me in years." He looked at her. "And because I think you're trying to do something real and hard," she said. "And I've never been good at walking away from something like that." She went inside. She heard the car pull away. She stood in her kitchen and thought about all of it. The plan, the danger, the hour and a half at his table with coffee and hard information. She thought about the 3 words he'd said with the particular difficulty of someone not accustomed to saying them. "I didn't expect it." She thought about Cora and the tulips. You have to do it right the first time, or you can recut them. But it's harder to fix once air's gotten in. She didn't sleep well. But it wasn't fear that kept her awake. It was the particular alertness of a person who has decided fully and without reservation to be in something. The weeks that followed moved quickly and not quietly. Marco called Adrian at 7 in the morning, 11 days after the garage conversation, with 2 pieces of information. The DeLuca people had made contact with a third party in Chicago, which meant Caruso's alliance was operational and not theoretical anymore. And one of the remaining legacy relationships, a man named Petrov, the last holdover from a distribution arrangement that predated Adrian's leadership, had received a visit from Caruso's people and was now in the uncertain position of someone being pressured to choose sides. "What does Petrov want?" Adrian said. "To stay out of it," Marco said. "Then help him stay out of it. And if Caruso pushes harder, then we make it very clear to Petrov that his best protection is not changing sides." He hung up and stood in the garage with the charger and thought about timelines. He had estimated 2 more months before the remaining relationships were fully severed. Caruso's move was an attempt to create chaos before that window closed, to generate enough pressure that the clean exit became impossible. He called Daria Savel. "Petrov," he said. "We know," she said. "We've been watching the same thing. What do you need from me?" "What I've always needed," she said. "Documentation on the Caruso-DeLuca communication. Your financial records through the transition period. And time. Time is the one thing Caruso is trying to take away." "I know," she said. "Which means we need to accelerate." It was the same conclusion he'd reached in the garage. "What's your timeline?" 6 weeks if everything moves right, 3 months if it doesn't." "Make it 6, he said. He called Marco back. He called 2 other people. He spent the morning making the kind of calls that would have been made 10 years ago for different reasons. He was good at it. He had always been good at it. The mechanism of it was the same whether you were building something up or taking it apart, and he had spent 4 years now taking it apart with the same efficiency his grandfather had used to build it. He texted Violet at noon. "Everything okay?" Her reply came 3 minutes later. Cora came in. She did something incredible with the Dahlia stock. "I'm going to keep her." He read it twice. The particular quality of it, the normalcy, The realness, the dahlias did something that he wasn't going to analyze in depth. He texted back, "Good." She sent a photo of the arrangement. He looked at it for a moment. Then he set his phone down and got back to work. The arrangement was genuinely beautiful. He didn't know what to do with that either. 3 days later, Violet was leaving the shop at closing time 6:15, the November dark, already full outside, when she noticed the car. Not because it was doing anything aggressive. Not because anyone got out or followed her or made any kind of move. Just a dark sedan parked across the street, engine running. She had a good eye for parked cars with running engines. She kept walking. She took the route she'd varied since the garage conversation, the one that went around the block first before heading toward the bus stop, the one that let her cover more visual ground. She called Adrian's cell. He picked up on the first ring. "There's a car across from the shop," she said, keeping her voice even. "Dark engine running, been there since at least when I unlocked the door at the end of the day." "What direction are you walking?" "North on Halstead. Keep walking at the same pace. Don't look back." A pause, then his voice off the line, something in clipped syllables she couldn't quite catch. Then back to her, "Russo is 2 blocks behind you. He's going to come alongside in about 45 seconds. She kept walking. Her heart was going at a specific elevated rate, and she breathed deliberately. 30 seconds later, a man she recognized as one of Adrian's regular security team pulled up beside her in a black SUV. "Ms. Bennett," he said through the open window, low and professional. "If you'd like to get in." She got in. Russo said nothing else. He drove. Adrian was still on the line. "Are you okay?" he said. "I'm okay," she said. "Is it Caruso's people?" "Probably surveillance. Making a point." "Making a point," she repeated. "Okay. Are you actually okay?" She thought about it. Her hands were not shaking. Her voice was steady. She was in the back of an SUV being driven away from a surveillance team, and she was strangely okay. "Yes," she said. "But I want to know the moment you know anything more." "You'll know when I know," he said. "No hedging. No, I'll tell you what you need to. You'll know when I know." She believed him. She rode to his building. He met her in the lobby, already there, when the SUV pulled up, coat on, like he'd been ready to move. He looked at her with the specific intensity of a man running a rapid assessment. "You're sure you're okay?" he said. Not a question. "I told you I'm okay," she said. "I'm not fragile." "I know you're not fragile." "Then stop looking at me like that." He stopped. She could see the effort it cost him. "Come upstairs," he said. "Marco is already here. We're going to deal with this tonight." She went upstairs. Marco was a compact, serious man in his mid-40s who had the bearing of someone who had spent a long time being the second most important person in a room. He looked at Violet with the particular assessment of someone who had heard about her and was updating his mental file. She looked back. "Marco," she said. "Ms. Bennett," he said. "Violet," she said. He nodded once. "Violet." They sat at the table, the same table where she'd had coffee with hard information 11 days ago, and Marco laid out what they knew. The sedan had been parked since 4 p.m. Plates were registered to a shell company that traced back with enough layers to a holding entity connected to Caruso's network. It was a message, not an action. Not yet. "They're escalating the pressure," Marco said. This was intentional visibility. They wanted her to notice. "Why?" Violet said. Both men looked at her. "Why did they want me to notice? If they were just surveilling me, they'd stay invisible." "But they made it visible, so they wanted me to see them, to tell Adrian I saw them, which means they wanted Adrian to know they'd been there." Marco looked at Adrian. Something passed between them. "She's right," Marco said. "I know," Adrian said. "They're not trying to take any action yet," Violet said. "They're trying to make you react, to make you make a move based on fear for me that takes you off whatever timeline you're on." "Yes," Adrian said. "So don't." Marco looked at her again. "Don't react," she said. "Keep the timeline. I'll vary my routes. I'll take the security detail, I'll be careful, but don't let them make you move before you're ready." The room was quiet. Adrian was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him before. Not the careful reading look, something underneath that. "You understand this world very quickly," he said. "I understand pressure tactics," she said. "The currency's different, but the mechanics aren't." "The mechanics," Marco said in a tone that suggested he was filing this. "People use fear to make other people act against their own interests," she said. "I've seen it. My mother dealt with landlords who did this, creditors who did this. The move is always the same: make the threat visible enough to create panic, then wait for the panic to do your work for you." "And the counter," Adrian said. It wasn't a question. He was already there, but he wanted to hear her say it. "Don't panic," she said. "Keep your plan. Make them wait," Marco said quietly to Adrian. "I like her." Adrian said nothing, but something in his face, just for a second, was completely unmanaged. She saw it. She didn't remark on it. She filed it in the same place she filed the charger and the white peonies, and the way he said "not tonight." Later, after Marco had left, and the plan had been laid out and confirmed, and the security protocols agreed to, she and Adrian sat in the kitchen again with coffee that was too late at night for coffee, but neither of them mentioned that. "Elena texted me again," he said. "What did she say this time?" "She wants to know if the florist is still around." "What did you tell her?" He looked at her across the table. "I told her yes." She smiled. "That's it. I also told her." He stopped, started again, chose his words. "I told her that she is considerably more than I expected." Violet looked at him for a moment. "Is that what you told her?" she said. "Or is that what you think?" "Both," he said. Simply. She put her hands around her coffee cup. The kitchen was quiet. The city was outside doing what cities did at 11 p.m. "What happens at the end of the 6 weeks?" she said. "If everything goes right. Caruso has no leverage and no alliances that can hurt us. The remaining connections are cut. The businesses are clean, and he thought about the word. "The other part of the life is finished." "Finished," she repeated. "Just like that." "Not just like that," he said. 4 years of work. But yes, finished. And then what?" He looked at her. "Then something different." "Different like what?" "Like a man who owns buildings, and a car he's restoring, and a flower shop account he's going to contribute to whether the florist likes it or not." He said the last part with a tone that was as close to dry humor as she'd heard from him. She opened her mouth. "Don't argue with me about that yet," he said. "It's not yet." She closed her mouth. "I will argue with you about it when it's yet." "I expect you will." Loudly. "I know." She looked at him. The kitchen light, the coffee cup. The man who had been waiting for 6 weeks inside, 6 years of work, who had a sister who texted about the florist, who kept a car that reminded him of something worth finishing. 6 weeks, she said. "If everything goes right," he said. "And if it doesn't?" He looked at her. "Then I'll handle it." "We'll handle it," she said. He was quiet. "We," she said again, steady and clear. He looked at her for a long time, and then, with the particular effort of a man dismantling something that has protected him for a long time, he said, "We." She held that word. She was still holding it when she left at midnight, when Russo drove her home, when she stood in her apartment in the dark and thought about everything that word contained. We was a different country than anything either of them had been in before. The question was whether they would both still be standing when the 6 weeks were done. She thought they would. She also knew, with the clarity of someone who had grown up learning the difference between hope and wishful thinking, that knowing you would stand and actually standing were two different things. She made tea. She went to bed. She thought about the car across the street, the running engine, the deliberate visibility of it. She thought about, don't panic. Keep your plan. She thought about we. She slept. The 6 weeks did not go right. Not all of them anyway. The first two moved the way Adrian had planned, methodically controlled each step landing where he'd placed it. Petrov was stabilized. The documentation Daria needed was assembled and transferred through the right channels. One of the three remaining legacy relationships was severed cleanly with a meeting that lasted 20 minutes and ended with a handshake that both parties understood was final. Marco reported that Caruso's surveillance on the shop had not escalated beyond the initial visible pass, which Adrian read correctly, as a man still deciding how hard to push. Violet kept her routes varied. She took the security without arguing about it. She went to work and arranged flowers and taught Cora about stem conditioning and called Emily twice a week and texted Adrian at odd hours with things that had nothing to do with any of it. A dahlia that had come in the wrong color and was somehow more beautiful for it. A conversation with Mr. Devereaux, who had finally told her his wife's name, which was Rose, which she thought about for the rest of that afternoon. He texted back every time. She noticed that he always texted back. The third week was when things shifted. It started with Marco's call on a Tuesday morning, same as most of the important things had started in the past month. Adrian was in the garage. He had been spending more time in the garage, which Violet had come to understand was how she could read his stress level without asking him directly. Caruso made contact with Petrov again, Marco said. Adrian set down the wrench. What kind of contact? In person. Two of his guys showed up at Petrov's place of business yesterday evening. Stayed for 40 minutes. What happened? Petrov called me at 11 p.m. He's frightened. What did they say to him? They didn't say much. They didn't have to. Marco paused. They knew things, Adrian, about Petrov's daughter, where she goes to school, what time she gets out. The garage went very quiet. Where is she now? Adrian said. Safe. I already had people there before Petrov finished the call. And Petrov, shaken. He wants out. He wants to give Caruso whatever he's asking for and be done. What is Caruso asking for? He wants a meeting with you, in person, no security on either side. Adrian was quiet for 3 seconds. That's not a meeting. That's a setup. I know. Petrov knows too, I think. But he's scared enough that he's asking me to ask you. Tell Petrov his daughter is covered. Tell him he doesn't need to decide anything right now. He picked the wrench back up, put it down again. And tell him I know what Caruso is doing, and I'm not going to let him be in the middle of it. And the meeting request? No, Adrian said. Flat. Final. He hung up. He stood in the garage and looked at the charger. The body of it was almost fully restored. Now the work had accelerated in the past 3 weeks in direct proportion to how loud everything else had gotten. The engine was the last major piece. He had planned to start on it at the end of the month. He texted Violet. How's the shop? Her reply came fast. Busy. Good busy. Cora's here. Are you okay? He looked at that last part for a moment. Are you okay? She always asked. Not how's the situation, not what's happening. Are you okay? Like the man was the thing that mattered, and the situation was secondary. He typed fine. Talk tonight. She sent back 7. He put the phone in his pocket, called Daria. She picked up on the second ring. I heard about Petrov, she said. Your people are quick. We've had eyes on Caruso's crew for 10 days. We saw the visit. A pause. Adrian, he's getting impatient. The fact that he went after Petrov's daughter, that's escalation. That's a man who's running out of patience for the slow approach. What does that mean for the timeline? It means we need to accelerate. Again. Her voice was careful. And it means Violet's exposure level is something I need to talk to you about. He was very still. Say it. Caruso's people have been conducting what I'd call intensive pattern analysis on her movements, more detailed than casual surveillance. They're building a predictability map. We've been varying her routes. I know, it's helped, but Adrian, they're patient, and they have resources. And 6 weeks of watching anything tells you things that pattern variation can't fully disguise. A pause. I think you need to consider a more significant change in her situation. Define significant. Temporary relocation, 2 to 3 weeks, until we can close this out. He was quiet. I know, Daria said. She's not going to like it. No, he said. She's not. Do you want me to? I'll tell her, he said. Tonight. He hung up. He went back to the charger. He put his hands on the roof of it cool metal solid reel and stood there for a moment. He thought about a woman who had said we like. It was the most natural word in the world. Who had told Marco, don't panic, keep the plan with the confidence of someone who had been reading pressure tactics her whole life. Who had asked him, are you okay this morning? Like the answer genuinely mattered. He thought about what he was about to ask her to do. To uproot her life. Leave her shop, put distance between herself and everything she'd spent years building because of him. Because of who he was, and where he came from, and the specific unfinished business of his family's history. He had known this was possible. He had told her on the stairs of her building weeks ago, there will be things I don't know yet. He had told her in the garage. He had tried at every step to give her the full picture. But knowing something was possible was different from the moment it actually arrived. He thought about the cracked heel of her shoe. The way she'd been ready to leave before she'd even gone inside the restaurant, sure he wasn't there. Sure the evening was over before it started. She was accustomed to things not working out. He was not going to let that be the ending of this. He pulled out his phone. He called Marco. Get me everything we have on safe properties outside the city, he said. Nothing connected to the family name. Clean titles. And make it somewhere she can work. She'll need internet space, the ability to run her business remotely if necessary. How far out? Far enough to matter. Close enough that she doesn't feel exiled. I'll have options by 5, Marco said. Good. He put the phone down and picked up the wrench. He worked on the charger for 3 hours straight, the way he worked when there was nothing else productive to do with the energy moving through him. He was not afraid of Caruso. That was the simple truth of it. He had dealt with men like Caruso his entire adult life, and he understood them with the specific contempt of someone who had watched their kind of play run out for 20 years. Caruso was not creative. He was not patient. He was a man who had built his importance on being the middle of other people's arrangements, and when the middle was removed, he was exposed as someone with no actual power of his own, which was the most dangerous kind of man, because desperation made them unpredictable. What Adrian was afraid of was simpler and harder than Caruso. He was afraid of losing the thing he had not expected to find. He had not planned for Violet Bennett. He had not planned for a woman who showed up soaked and cracked-heeled and apologizing before she said hello, and then proceeded to be over the course of 6 weeks the most genuinely herself person he had been around in years. He had not planned for someone who made him talk about Tommy, who noticed the security detail without flinching, who sat at his kitchen table and told Marco don't panic like she'd been doing this her whole life. He had not planned for any of it. He picked up the wrench and thought about what it meant to have something you hadn't planned for, and how much harder that made it to risk losing. At 7 o'clock, she called instead of texted. Something happened, she said when he picked up. Her voice was controlled and even, and he could tell immediately that she was working to keep it that way. He was already reaching for his jacket. Tell me. Someone came into the shop today, around 4. A man I didn't recognize. He didn't buy anything. He just looked around, asked me if I was the owner. I said no. He said... She stopped. Started again. He said to tell the owner that the neighborhood was changing, that some businesses had a harder time adapting than others. The cold that moved through Adrian was not temperature. Did he touch anything? No, he left after about 2 minutes, but Adrian... Her voice dropped just slightly. Cora was here. He closed his eyes. 1 second, then open. Is Cora okay? She's fine. She didn't understand what was happening. I sent her home as soon as he left. A pause. Russo was outside, but the man came and went before... I know, Russo already called me. He was pulling on his jacket. Violet, I need you to listen to me. I'm listening. I'm coming to get you. Don't close up alone tonight. Wait for Russo to come inside. I can... Violet, please. She was quiet for a moment. The please landed differently than any of his instructions had before, and she heard it. Okay, she said. I'll wait. He drove himself, which he almost never did, because he needed the 15 minutes of movement and control and the particular clarity that came from being behind a wheel. He thought about the man in the shop, the deliberate choice to go in while Cora was there, the specific cruelty of that, the message it was designed to send, not just to Violet, but to him. Look at what we can reach. Look at how close we can get. Caruso had just stopped being a slow problem. He called Marco from the car. The shop visit. I know, Marco said. I'm already on it. I want full identification on the man inside of 6 hours. 4, Marco said. And I want Cora's home address covered tonight. She's 12 years old, and she was in the shop when this happened. A brief silence on the other end of the line. Done, Marco said. He picked Violet up from the shop. She was standing at the counter when he came in. Not sitting, standing, her hands moving over the stems she'd been conditioning, the same way she moved when she was burning off something she didn't want to say yet. She looked at him when he came in the door, and something in her posture changed. Not weakness, not collapse. Just, she let something go that she'd been holding since the man walked in at 4 o'clock. Hey, she said. Hey, he said. He crossed the shop and put his hand on the side of her face, and she leaned into it just briefly, just for a second, and then she straightened. Tell me what you know, she said. He told her everything. The Petrov situation, the daughter, the pattern analysis. Daria had described the meeting request he'd refused. He told it straight through, the way she'd taught him to, all of it fast. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, he sent someone into the shop where a 12-year-old was. Yes. To make a point. Yes. Her jaw tightened. It was the first thing close to anger he'd seen from her since this started, and it was not fear-based anger, it was the specific fury of someone whose line had been crossed. What do you need from me? She said. Daria has recommended temporary relocation, 2 to 3 weeks outside the city while we close this out. She stared at him. The shop? Your assistant can manage the day-to-day. Marco can arrange remote access for anything administrative. The orders you have booked. I have a corporate account renewal meeting next week, Adrian. I have Cora's school coming in for a holiday arrangement workshop that I set up 3 months ago. I know. I can't just leave. I know, he said. I'm not telling you it's simple. I'm telling you it's what I think needs to happen. She turned away from him, moved to the window. He watched her think the particular quality of her silence when she was doing the real work of processing something hard. What about Cora? She said. Covered. I've already arranged it. She turned back. You covered Cora. Before you asked me to, he said. Yes. She looked at him for a moment. Something moved across her face. Where would I go? She said. There's a house in Lake Geneva. Clean title, not connected to anything with my name on it. Quiet, secure, full internet. You could run everything remotely except the physical work. How long have you had this property? Marco identified it this afternoon. She stared at him. You had it identified this afternoon because you already knew you were going to suggest this. I knew the situation was moving toward this. I wanted to have options before we talked. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said with a tone he recognized as someone choosing their words precisely. You planned ahead, instead of reacting. Yes. That's... She stopped. Okay, that's actually the right call. A pause. I still don't like it. I know. Leaving feels like letting him win. Leaving keeps you safe while I finish this, he said. Those are 2 different things. Are they? Caruso wants me to make emotional decisions. Keeping you close because it makes me feel better about your safety would be an emotional decision. This is a strategic one. She looked at him steadily. You're very logical about things that are clearly costing you something. He met her gaze. It costs me more to think about the alternative. She was quiet. How long? She said. Honestly, best case. 2 weeks, he said. If everything Daria is moving comes together the way she expects. And worst case, 4, he said. And if it goes to 4, I'm going to tell you why. She nodded slowly, looked around the shop. At the dahlias she'd arranged that morning. At the window where Cora had put the tulips and rosemary, which she'd left exactly as Cora had placed them. I want to call the shop owner myself and explain, she said, not have someone do it for me. Of course. And I want to talk to Cora. Yes. And Emily. Whatever you need. She looked at him. Stop agreeing with everything. It's making me suspicious. He almost smiled. I'll disagree with you on something later. Give me time. She exhaled, long and slow, the kind of exhale that is a decision being finished. Okay, she said. Lake Geneva, 2 weeks. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, she said. I'm furious about this. I know. I'm doing it because it's right, not because I'm happy about it. I know that too. And the second this is finished. She pointed at him. I'm going back to the shop and I'm never varying my route again out of spite. Fair, he said. She picked up her coat from behind the counter and looked at the shop one more time. 2 weeks, she said like a contract. 2 weeks, he said. She left with him. She was gone by Thursday morning. Russo driving her north with 2 bags and her laptop and the small succulent she kept on the shop counter that she'd refused to leave behind. She called Adrian from the car. The house better have decent coffee, she said. Marco stocked it yesterday. Marco stocked my house. He was very thorough. That man is frightening in a completely different way than I expected. He takes tasks seriously. He put lavender in the bedroom, she said. How did he know I like lavender? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Adrian, you mentioned it once, that the shop smelled like lavender in July when the summer stock came in. She was quiet on the other end of the line. I mentioned that once, she said, in passing. I told Marco. You told Marco to put lavender in the bedroom because I mentioned it once. Yes. The line was quiet for a long moment. That is, she said, and her voice was slightly different than it had been, one of the nicest things anyone has ever done for me. Which I realize sounds ridiculous given the context. It doesn't sound ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous because the context is I'm being relocated for my safety, and the standout detail is lavender. Sometimes the standout detail is the one that tells you what someone is paying attention to, he said. She didn't answer that. He let the silence sit. I'll call you tonight, she said finally. I'll be here, he said. She hung up. He put his phone in his pocket and walked into the building where Marco was waiting with Daria Savell and 2 of her colleagues and a very large amount of documentation, and he prepared to finish something that had been waiting to be finished for 4 years. The next 8 days moved fast and not gently. Daria's team moved on Caruso on day 3. Not an arrest, not yet, but a formal interview that made clear the walls were closing, and that the choice between cooperation and consequence was becoming time-sensitive. Caruso's response was to go quiet, which Marco read correctly as a man recalculating. Adrian dismantled the second legacy relationship on day 4. A man named Greer who had been part of the family's distribution structure for 15 years, and who took the severance with the particular relief of someone who had been waiting for permission to leave. The meeting took 40 minutes. Adrian shook his hand at the end. He meant it. Petrov called on day 5 to say that Caruso's people had not returned, and that whatever Adrian had done had apparently communicated clearly enough. Adrian told him to take his daughter somewhere warm for 2 weeks. Petrov went quiet for a second. and then said thank you in a way that contained more than the words. Violet called every evening at 7. Sometimes they talked for an hour, sometimes 20 minutes. She was working running the shop remotely with her assistant, covering the physical piece, handling administrative tasks, developing a new corporate proposal on her laptop at the kitchen table in Lake Geneva. She told him about it in pieces. She was thinking about expanding the corporate accounts. She had 3 new potential clients who'd come in through the website. "You're building from a kitchen table in Lake Geneva," he said on the 6th night. "I'm building everywhere I have a laptop," she said. "The location is temporary. The work isn't." "You said you've wanted your own shop for 8 years," he said. "At this rate, you're going to have 3 locations before you have the first one. Don't oversell it. I have 2 potential clients and a very enthusiastic 12-year-old. Cora's called the shop twice this week to check on the Dahlia stock," he said. She laughed. "How do you know that?" Her mother mentioned it when Russo checked in. Russo is checking in with Cora's mother. She mentioned it. He relayed it. "You have a security team delivering neighborhood social updates," she said. "That's not what security teams are for." "Mine are flexible," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "How are things moving? Forward," he said. "Fast." "How many days?" "I think 4," he said. "Maybe 5. And then it's done. And then it's done. All of it." The Caruso situation, the last relationship, all of it, he said. She was quiet for a moment. He could hear her breathing, could hear the particular silence of a house in November that was not her usual house. "I want to come home," she said. Not a complaint, just a statement. 4 days, he said. Maybe 5. "Tell me when it's 4, she said. "I can do 4. "I'll tell you," he said. "Okay," she said. "Go do whatever you need to do." "Good night, Violet." "Good night, Adrian." It was 4 days. The third legacy relationship. A man named Costello. The last and most complicated piece. Someone who had been with the family long enough to have information that required careful handling was resolved on day 9, with the help of Daria's team, in an arrangement that protected what needed to be protected and documented what needed to be documented. Costello retired to Florida. He sent Adrian a text that said only "fair enough." Adrian didn't respond, but he held his phone for a moment after reading it. Caruso was arrested on day 10. Not by surprise, Daria had told Adrian it was coming, and Adrian had told her whatever you need the same way he'd been saying it for 6 months. The charges were specific and well supported, and the kind that didn't leave much room for creative legal maneuvering because Daria had been careful and patient and had built something airtight. Marco called Adrian when it happened. "It's done," he said. Adrian was in the garage. He was sitting on a stool next to the Charger, which was finished. He had put the last piece of the engine in 2 days ago, had run it for the first time yesterday, had listened to it, turn over, and felt something that he didn't have clean language for. He'd stood in the garage alone for 15 minutes just listening to it run. "Thank you," he told Marco, "for everything." Marco was quiet for a moment. "She's good for you," he said. "For what it's worth." "It's worth something," Adrian said. "I know it is. That's why I said it." He hung up. He sat in the garage for a little while longer. He thought about his grandfather who had come from Sicily with $40 and a set of skills that were useful in a city that didn't ask questions. He thought about his father who had expanded something that never should have grown as large as it did. He thought about Elena who had gotten out early and built something clean and was the most functional person in the family by a significant margin. He thought about Tommy, who had worked 30 years and gotten old, and left behind a car that nobody had finished. He thought about a woman who had arrived, soaked and cracked-heeled and apologizing, and who had sat across from him for 3 hours without asking about his money, and who had said, "I was going to say kind," like it was the most obvious thing. He picked up his phone. He called Violet. She picked up on the first ring. "It's done," he said. She was quiet for a second. Then, all of it. All of it. She exhaled. Long and slow, the same exhale as in the shop when she'd agreed to Lake Geneva, but different in quality, this one going down instead of down and held. "Caruso," she said. Arrested this morning. Daria's team. And the last of the other pieces. Done. Clean. He paused. Violet. It's done. She was quiet for a moment. He could hear her moving around the kitchen, the sound of something being set down. I want to come home today, she said. Russo can be there in 2 hours. Tell him 1 hour, she said. I'm already packed. 1 hour, he said. Adrian. Yes. Thank you, she said. For doing what you said you were going to do. He was quiet for a moment. Thank you for staying, he said. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. You did. I meant it. I know, he said. That's what I'm thanking you for. She came back at 3 in the afternoon, Russo pulling up outside her building, and she got out with 2 bags and the succulent and walked inside and up the stairs to her apartment. She stood in the middle of it for a moment. Her apartment, her specific smell of it, the herbal tea she'd left open, the particular quality of her own rooms. She unpacked both bags. She put the succulent back on the windowsill. She called Emily. I'm home, she said. Emily shrieked. Actually shrieked. I've been sitting on information for 11 days, and I need to tell you everything at the same time. Not tonight, Violet said. Tomorrow. I need tonight. Emily paused. Oh, she said. Yeah, okay, of course. A softer pause. You okay? Yes, Violet said. Actually, yes. Good, Emily said. Then tomorrow. All of it. She hung up. She showered and changed and stood in her kitchen and made tea the way her mother had taught her. And at 5 o'clock, Adrian knocked on her door. She opened it. He was there, and she looked at him, the same man who had stood outside the restaurant in the rain 7 weeks ago, except not the same at all, because 7 weeks was long enough for the version you first saw to be replaced by something realer and more complicated, and in this case, more than she'd expected to find. You came here, she said. Yes. You could have sent Russo. I could have, he said. I didn't want to. She stepped back and let him in. He came inside and looked at her apartment with the careful attention he applied to most things, and she watched him take it in, the succulent on the windowsill, the flowers she'd put in a jar on the counter this morning because she'd stopped at the shop on the way back and couldn't help herself, the kettle still on from her tea. It looks like you, he said. That's usually how apartments work. Some people's apartments look like nobody lives in them, he said. This looks like you. She looked at him. What does that mean? It means it has things in it that matter to you, and they're placed where they make sense, and it smells like something you chose. She was quiet for a moment. That's a very specific observation. You're a specific person. She went to the counter and poured him tea without asking, because she had learned that he didn't always say what he wanted, but he accepted things that were offered without pretense. She handed him the cup. He took it. They stood in her kitchen. Tell me it's really finished, she said. It's really finished. The Caruso thing. Daria's team has enough to put him away for a long time. The alliances he built don't survive him being incarcerated. The DeLuca connection goes cold without him managing it. And the last piece, Costello. In Florida, he said. We're done. And the businesses. Clean, he said. The last audit clears in 3 weeks. After that, there's nothing to tie any of it back to anything other than legitimate holdings. She wrapped her hands around her cup. What does your life look like after? He thought about it. Quieter, he said. The buildings. The import company that I've been running clean for 2 years now. The charger, which is finished, I ran it for the first time 2 days ago. She looked at him. You finished it. While you were in Lake Geneva, the engine work. I told you it was the last piece. You finished it and didn't tell me. I wanted to tell you in person. She looked at him for a moment. I want to hear it run. I know, he said. I was going to take you to the garage this week. Saturday, she said. Saturday. He agreed. She was quiet. He was quiet. The kettle had stopped, and the apartment had the specific silence of a place that had been empty for 11 days and was now occupied again. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I want you to answer it the way you answered me in the garage. Not managed." He looked at her. "Are you actually out?" she said. "Not tactically out, not strategically out. Actually, fully no going back out." He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "The decision was made 4 years ago. Everything since then has been execution. The execution is finished." "Why did you start?" she said. 4 years ago, what made you decide?" He was quiet for a moment. She watched him decide how to answer, not whether to, she could see he was going to, but how to find the honest version. "My father died," he said. "And I sat in his house afterward, and I looked at what he'd spent his life building, and I thought about what it had cost. Not to him, to other people, to people who didn't choose it." He paused. "And I thought about Elena, who had chosen to have nothing to do with it, and had built something real. And I thought that the measure of a person isn't what they inherit. It's what they decide to do with it." She looked at him. "That's the whole answer," he said. "It's not more complicated than that." "No," she said. "It's not." She set down her cup. She said, "I need you to know something about why I stayed. Not just the practical reasons, the fact that you were honest with me, the fact that you kept your word about telling me things. Those matter, but that's not all of it." He waited. "I stayed," she said, "because I've spent my whole life watching people in hard situations make the wrong choice because it was easier. My father left because it was easier than staying. Marcus the first. Marcus lied because it was easier than being honest." She paused. "You chose the harder thing. 4 years ago and every day since. And I don't know how to walk away from someone who does that." He was very still. "You chose it before you knew me," she said. "That matters. It means it wasn't about me. It was about who you decided to be." He looked at her for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I don't need a perfect man. I need a man brave enough to become better." She stared at him. "That's what you said," he said. 3 weeks ago, on the phone. You were talking about Marcus, the other Marcus, and how you'd talked him through something." "I said that about my brother." "I know," he said. "I've been thinking about it since." She was quiet. "I'm not perfect," he said. "I've told you that. There are things I've done that I can't undo. The best I can do is make sure that what comes after is different." "I know," she said. "I'm asking you." He stopped, started again. With the particular difficulty that she had learned meant he was being completely unmanaged. "I'm asking you to let me do that differently. With you." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the rain and the restaurant and the jacket, about the garage and the charger and Tommy's name said like it mattered, about lavender in a bedroom in Lake Geneva and Marco stocking a kitchen and a 12-year-old's window display left exactly where she put it, about we said with effort like dismantling something. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "You've been asking me that since the first night," she said, "and I've been saying yes." Something in his face shifted. All the way through, all at once, the thing that was always managed finally just went. She stepped forward. She put her hand on his chest over his heart, the way you put your hand on something you want to confirm is real. "I'm still saying yes," she said. He put his hand over hers. They stood in her kitchen with the tea going cold and the succulent on the windowsill and the flowers she couldn't help buying on the counter, and neither of them said anything for a long moment because some things are complete without words. Then he said, "Saturday, the charger." "Saturday," she said. "I want to hear it." "You will," he said. She believed him. She had learned over the past 7 weeks that when Adrian Moretti said something would happen, it happened. Not because he forced it, but because he was the kind of man who did not make promises he hadn't already built the foundation for. That she thought standing in her kitchen with his hand over hers was worth more than she'd known to want. Saturday arrived cold and clear, the kind of November morning that Chicago occasionally produced, as a reminder that beauty and brutality could share the same sky. Violet was ready at 9, not 7, because the garage visit was a morning thing. She'd decided something that deserved daylight, and when Adrian picked her up, he was already in the specific quiet of a man who had slept well for the first time in weeks. She noticed that about him immediately. The quality of his stillness had changed. It was no longer the stillness of management of control being actively maintained. It was the stillness of someone who had set something down and felt the difference in their hands. "You look different," she said in the car. He glanced at her. "Different how?" "Like you put something heavy in another room." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's accurate." "How does it feel?" He thought about it. She appreciated that he actually thought about it rather than reaching for the easy answer. "Strange," he said. "Like muscle memory for a thing you no longer need to do." She understood that. She thought about the years of managing her family's needs while her own plans weighted the specific habit of deferring, of putting her name on a list below everyone else's. She knew what it felt like when the reason for that habit was gone and the habit remained reaching for a weight that wasn't there anymore. "It gets easier," she said. "The strangeness." He looked at her briefly. "You know this." "I know this," she said. They drove the rest of the way without talking, and it was the comfortable kind of quiet that she had stopped being surprised by with him, the kind that meant two people had run out of things they needed to say and were simply occupying the same space without discomfort. In the garage, the charger was waiting. She had imagined it from his descriptions across 2 months of dinners and phone calls, and kitchen table conversations had built it in her mind from the pieces he'd given her, the color, the lines, the particular era of it. But imagining and standing in front of the real thing were different, and she stood in front of it for a long moment. "Get in," he said. She looked at him. "I'm not starting it from out here," he said. "Get in." She got in. The seat was original leather, restored but not replaced. She could feel the history of it, the particular give of something that had been somewhere a long time. He got in on the other side. She could feel the size of the engine through the chassis before he even turned the key, the potential of it all, that displaced power waiting. He turned the key. The sound that came up through the floor and through the seat and into her chest was not loud the way she'd expected. It was deep. It was the kind of sound that you felt before you heard it, that rearranged something physical before your brain caught up. It was the sound of something that had been broken and was now entirely whole. She put her hand on the dash without thinking about it. "There it is," she said. Quiet. He didn't say anything. He was listening to it the way she listened to the shop in the morning, the specific check, the confirmation, the private relief of a thing being what it was supposed to be. They sat in the running car in the garage for maybe 3 minutes, just listening. Then he turned it off. The silence after was different from the silence before. "Tommy would have liked that," she said. He looked at her, something in his face. "Yes," he said. "He would have." She looked at the dash under her hand. "What are you going to do with it?" "Drive it," he said. Simply. Wherever I want," he said. "That's the point." She smiled. She took her hand off the dash. She looked at him in the specific light of the garage, the man who had been a stranger outside a restaurant in the rain 8 weeks ago, and she thought about how little she had known then, and how much she knew now, and how those two things, the before and the after, would always be connected by a cracked heel and a soaked dress and a borrowed jacket. "Wherever you want," she said. "I like that." He looked at her. "Come with me." "Right now." "Not right now. Eventually." He paused. "When you have time. When the shop allows it." "The shop I don't have yet." "The shop you will have," he said. "When you do." She held his gaze. "You're very confident about that shop." "I'm confident about you," he said. "The shop is a consequence." She felt something warm move through her chest that she was no longer afraid to acknowledge. "Okay," she said. "Eventually. Wherever you want." He started the car again. They drove for 2 hours. No destination, just Chicago, and the November light, and the sound of the engine doing what it had been rebuilt to do. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't explain. They went north along the lake and west through neighborhoods she knew, and some she didn't, and then south again, the city moving past the windows like something being slowly understood. She thought at some point in the middle of it that this was what the car was actually for. Not the restoration, not the completion of the project. This. 2 people in a car going somewhere that didn't need a name. When he brought her home at noon, she stood on the bottom step of her building and looked at him. "Saturday was a good idea," she said. "Your idea," he said. "I said Saturday. The drive was yours." "The drive was the car's," he said. "I just steered." She laughed. She climbed one step, which put her at eye level with him, same as that first night. "Elena still wants to meet me," she said. He looked at her. "She's mentioned it every day this week. And what did you tell her?" "I told her to be patient." "And was she?" "No," he said. "But she has good manners, so she pretended." Violet considered. "Next week. I'll tell her." "Tell her I want the honest version of you," she said. "Not the one you'd describe yourself." He looked at her with the expression that she had come to love, the one that meant she had said something he hadn't anticipated, and he was filing it. "She'll enjoy that," he said. "I thought she might." She went inside. She stood in her apartment and put her hands on the counter and felt the particular quality of an afternoon that had been exactly what it was supposed to be. No crisis, no management, no information to process. Just the sound of an engine, and the city moving past, and a man who had driven 2 hours for the pleasure of it. She made lunch. She called her mother. Her mother answered on the 3rd ring, which meant she was having a good day. On the hard days, she let things go to voicemail. "Violet, baby," her mother said, "I was just thinking about you." "Good things, I hope." "Always." A pause. "You sound different." Her mother had always been able to do this to hear the quality of her. Violet had never been sure whether it was a mother thing or a specific to her mother thing. Different how? She said the same question she'd asked Adrian that morning. "Lighter," her mother said. "Like you put something down." Violet leaned against her counter and felt the echo of that across the morning. "Yeah," she said. "I think I did." "Tell me," her mother said. So she did. Not everything. Not the Caruso details. Not the federal agents. Not the specific mechanics of what had happened over the past 8 weeks. But the shape of it, a man, a blind date, a rainstorm, a conversation that had been honest from the first night. A complicated few weeks. The feeling now of something having resolved. Her mother listened, the way she had always listened, without interrupting, without rushing to conclusion. When Violet finished, her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "Does he make you feel safe? Not happy. Not swept off your feet. Safe." "Yes," Violet said. "In the real way. Not the comfortable way." "What's the difference?" "Safe comfortable means nothing bad happens. Safe real means you trust that if something bad happens, the person next to you won't disappear." Her mother was quiet. Then, "Your father was comfortable," she said, "right up until the moment he wasn't." Violet had thought about that. Had thought about the pattern of it, how her understanding of men had been shaped by a man who had been present and then one morning gone. How she had chosen in the years since men who were present in ways she could verify hourly. Men whose presence was measurable and therefore she had thought reliable. What she had learned about Adrian was different. His presence wasn't measurable in the way of someone who texted frequently and showed up when expected. His presence was the kind that showed up when it mattered. That kept its word. That said there will be things and then told her what they were before she had to ask. "I know the difference now," she told her mother. "Good," her mother said. "That took long enough." She laughed. "Thanks, Mom. I want to meet him." "I know. Soon. I'll work on it." "Violet." "Mom." "Soon," her mother said again, final. She hung up smiling. She went back to the shop on Monday, which felt like returning to herself in some precise and physical way. The smell of it. The green and wet morning smell that was hers, that she had been missing in Lake Geneva even when she hadn't said so. Her assistant Danny was behind the counter with the expression of a man who had managed 11 days solo and had opinions about it. "The Pemberton account," he said before she'd taken her coat off. "I know. I handled it remotely. They called 3 times on Thursday, and I called them back each time. What else? The holiday workshop for Cora's school. Rescheduled for next Friday, already confirmed." She hung up her coat. "What else?" Danny looked at her. "You seem annoyingly calm." "I had a good weekend," she said. "What else?" "The window display," he said. "I moved it while you were gone and now I think I put it back wrong." She went to the window and looked at it. Cora's arrangement, the tulips and rosemary that she had placed with the deliberate intuition of someone who understood space without being taught, was slightly off from how she'd left it. She adjusted 2 stems, stepped back. "Better," Danny said. "Don't touch her arrangements," Violet said. "She'll know. She's 12. She'll still know." The morning moved the way good mornings in the shop moved quickly, with the particular rhythm of things that needed doing and hands that knew how to do them. She was elbow-deep in a centerpiece order when Cora appeared at 3:30, yellow rain jacket, 2 braids, the serious expression. "You're back," Cora said. "I'm back." Cora looked at the window display, looked at Violet. "Someone moved my arrangement." "I fixed it," Violet said. "It's right." Cora went to the window and examined it with the critical attention of an artist checking her work. She made one small adjustment to a stem that Violet hadn't touched. "Okay," Cora said. "It's right now." Violet looked at her. "I have a question for you." Cora turned alert. "The holiday workshop next Friday," Violet said. "I want you here. Not as a visitor. As an assistant instructor." Cora stared at her. "You'd help the students with the arrangements. You'd show them the STEM conditioning, the things I've been teaching you." "I'm 12, Cora said. "I know. You're also better at this than half the people who've taken formal classes." Violet paused. "You'd be paid. Not a lot. But something." Cora was quiet for a moment. Then, "Would I get to pick one of the arrangements they make?" "Pick how? Like supervise, like you do. When you look at something someone made and you know it's not done yet." Violet felt something warm move through her chest, that she was becoming accustomed to this specific warmth that arrived when she watched someone discover the shape of what they were. "Yes," she said. "You'd get to supervise." Cora considered this with the gravity of someone signing a contract. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." "Good," Violet said. "Now come finish these centerpieces." Emily appeared at 5 without warning with 2 coffees and the expression of someone who had been sitting on information for 11 days and was done being patient about it. "I need everything," Emily said. "All of it. In order. Don't skip anything." "I'm still working." "I'll help." Emily took off her coat and picked up a pair of shears and looked at the bucket of dahlias on the table. "What do I do with these?" "Don't cut anything," Violet said. "Just hold them." "I can hold them and listen," Emily said. So Violet talked while she worked, and Emily held the dahlias and listened with the focused intensity she brought to things she genuinely cared about, asking questions only when something needed clarification, not interrupting the through line of it. When Violet got to the Lake Geneva part, Emily's expression shifted. "He had lavender put in the bedroom," Violet said. Emily put down the dahlias. "Because you mentioned it once. Once, in passing." "Violet?" "I know. That man is in love with you." Violet kept her hands moving. "It's been 8 weeks." "Time is a construct," Emily said. "He had lavender put in the bedroom because you mentioned it once. That's love. That's not a gesture, that's not strategy. That's a man who is paying the kind of attention you only pay when something matters." Violet was quiet. "I know," she said softer. "Does he know you know?" She thought about her kitchen, his hand over hers. "I'm still saying yes." "I think we know together," she said. Emily picked the dahlias back up. She was quiet for a moment. "I'm taking credit for this," she said. "You set up a blind date. A blind date that changed your life." "It was also a disaster," Violet said. "The bus broke down and I ruined my shoes." "And he gave you his jacket," Emily said. "And he waited. That's the part that matters. The beginning of the story is always a disaster. That's how you know it's real." Violet smiled. "Don't be smug about it," she said. "I'm absolutely being smug about it," Emily said. "I've earned this." 3 weeks after that conversation, 2 things happened that Violet would later identify as the moments when the future stopped being something she was building toward and became something she was standing in. The first happened on a Thursday afternoon. She had been working on the corporate proposal for 2 weeks. The expansion of her accounts. 3 new clients. The numbers that combined with what she had saved and what the current arrangement generated put something within reach that had spent 8 years being theoretical. She had run the numbers herself twice, and then asked Danny to check them, and Danny had checked them and looked up at her with an expression that said clearly that she needed to make a phone call she'd been putting off. She called the number of the commercial real estate agent she'd contacted 18 months ago and let drop when the timing wasn't right. "I've been thinking about the Halstead corridor properties," she said when the woman picked up. "The smaller ones. The ones with the right square footage for a retail plus workspace configuration." The agent was quiet for a second. Then, "There's something that came available 2 weeks ago. I hadn't called you because I thought—" "Call me about it," Violet said. "I want to see it." She saw it Friday morning. It was 4 blocks from the shop where she currently worked, close enough to keep the regular customers far enough to be its own thing. The space was exactly the size she'd been picturing for 8 years, which was the kind of thing that happened when you'd been picturing something for long enough that you knew its dimensions by feel. It had a back room that could serve as a workspace and a front that got afternoon light. She stood in the middle of it for a long time. She called Adrian from outside. "I found it," she said when he picked up. He went quiet for just a second. Then, the space. 4 blocks from where I work now. Right size, right light. She paused. "I can make the numbers work, without anything from you. I want you to know that." "I know that," he said. "I've always known that." "I'm telling you officially." "Officially received," he said. "Violet." "Yes." "Congratulations," he said, and the word carried the weight of someone who had watched her build toward this from the first night and was genuinely privately moved. She stood on the sidewalk outside the space that was going to be hers and felt the specific quality of a thing arriving that you had kept faith with for a long time. "Thank you," she said, "for believing it was going to happen." "It was always going to happen," he said. "I told you that." "You told me," she said. "I'm telling you, you were right." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's the first time you've said that." "Don't get used to it," she said. She could hear the thing in his voice that wasn't quite a laugh and was better. She signed the lease 3 weeks later. The second thing happened the following Sunday, which was the anniversary of the blind date, exactly 1 year to the day, which Emily had circled on a calendar she kept for this specific kind of thing, and had texted about 6 times in the preceding week. Adrian picked her up at 7. Not from her apartment from the new space, which she had been in every free hour for the past 3 weeks, painting the back room with Danny's help, installing shelves, doing the particular physical work of turning an empty room into the thing she had imagined. She was not done yet. It would be another 2 weeks before it was ready for any kind of soft opening. But the bones of it were visible, and they were right, and she was standing in the front room when he arrived. Paint on her hands, hair pulled back, the specific state of someone at the beginning of something. He came in and stopped. He looked at the space. At the afternoon light on the walls, she'd painted the deep, warm green she'd been picturing for 8 years. At the shelving. at the small handwritten card she'd taped above the workspace door that said in Cora's handwriting, because Cora had come in on Saturday and insisted on writing it, Violet's. He stood in the front room and looked at all of it. She watched him take it in. "Say something," she said. "It's exactly right," he said. "You haven't seen the back room? Show me." She showed him the back room, the workspace, the deep sink she'd had put in the shelving for stock, the small window she'd kept clear because she wanted to see weather when she was working. He walked through it with the careful attention he brought to things he wanted to understand properly. When they came back to the front, he stopped at the card above the door. "Cora," she said. "I know," he said. He looked at it for a moment. "How is she?" "She's extraordinary," Violet said. "I want to put her name on the door eventually, in smaller letters." "Has she agreed to that?" "Not yet, but she will." He looked at her. "I want to ask you something," he said. She waited. "Elena wants to do the flowers for her classroom holiday concert," he said. "Through your shop." A pause. "She insists on paying. I told her you'd say the same thing back, but she insists." Violet looked at him. "She wants to be a customer. She wants to support the shop without it being about me," he said. "She's very particular about the distinction." "I like her already." "I know. She'll be insufferable about that." Violet smiled. "Tell her yes, and tell her to come in herself so we can talk through what she wants." "She'll come 3 times for that conversation." "That's fine," Violet said. "That's what the shop is for." He looked at her for a moment. She could see the thing in his face that had been fully unmanaged since the night in her kitchen, the thing she had first glimpsed in a garage 7 weeks ago, and that had been growing less managed, more visible ever since. "Violet," he said. "I know," she said, "because she did. I haven't—" He stopped. The particular stop of a man choosing precision over speed. "I haven't said it directly." "I know. I'm going to say it directly." "Okay," she said. She put her paint-stained hands in her pockets and waited. "I'm in love with you," he said. Simply, fully. The way he said things he had decided to say. "I've been for a while. I'm not sure exactly when. Somewhere between the first dinner and the garage, and you sitting at my kitchen table telling Marco not to panic." He paused. "I wanted to tell you here, in this room." She looked at him. "In my room," she said. "In yours," he said. "Because it's yours, because you built it. And I wanted—" He stopped again, something in his expression that was entirely open. "I wanted you to have this as something that happened here." She stepped toward him. "Adrian," she said. "Yes. I love you," she said. "I have for a while. I think since the jazz bar actually, when you told Marco not to panic before I said anything, and it was the same answer I had already reached. I thought this man thinks the same way I do about the things that matter. And I didn't know what to do with that." He reached up and took her face in his hands gently, the way he touched things he was careful with. She covered his hands with hers, paint and all. "The shoes," he said quietly. "I still owe you shoes." She laughed. Actual involuntary real. "You've been thinking about the shoes for a year. You wouldn't let me replace them. I still won't." "Then I'll buy something else," he said. "Something you'll accept." "A dahlia," she said. "There's a variety burnt orange, very rare, I've been trying to source for 6 months. Find me that." He looked at her. "That's what you want. That's what I want. I'll have Marco find it," he said. "Marco," she said, fond. "Marco, who put lavender in the bedroom and stocks kitchens and runs social reports from the security team. He takes tasks seriously. Tell him this is the most important task he's had. He'll take that seriously too." She leaned her forehead against his right there in the front room of the shop that had her name on the door above the workspace. Paint on her hands. The afternoon light on the walls she'd chosen. The whole long year behind them, the rain, the restaurant, the garage, the kitchen table, Lake Geneva, the charger, running for the first time, the moment in her apartment with the tea going cold and his hand over hers. All of it present. All of it true. 1 year ago tonight, she said, "I was standing in the rain outside a restaurant I couldn't afford, sure you'd already left." "I almost went outside sooner," he said. "Marco told me to wait." She pulled back to look at him. "Marco told you to wait. He said if she came through the rain to get here, she'll come in on her own. Let her." She stared at him. Marco. He was right, Adrian said. She thought about that. About Marco, who was frightening in a completely different way than expected with his kitchen stocking and his lavender and his tactical patience applied apparently to everything, including blind dates. "I'm going to send him flowers," she said, "from the shop, when it opens." "He'll put them in the office," Adrian said. "He'll never mention them, but he'll keep them until they're gone." She knew this was true. She knew this, the way she knew the shop would open, and Cora would be extraordinary, and the dahlia would eventually be found, and the charger would take them somewhere with no name. She knew it the way she knew that she was standing in the right room with the right person at the end of the right year, not because everything had gone smoothly, but because everything that had gone wrong had been the thing that got them here. She stepped back and looked at him. "Come on," she said. "Take me to dinner." "Savelli's," he said. "God, no," she said. "Nico's, red checkered tablecloth. He'll say I like her immediately again." "I know," she said. "I want to hear it." He helped her into her coat. She turned off the light in the back room. She took one look at the front of the shop, the green walls, the shelving, the small card above the door in Cora's handwriting, and felt the full weight of it. The 8 years of patience, and the 1 year of something she hadn't planned for all of it. Arriving here, all of it meaning something. She locked the door. They walked out into the November evening Chicago, doing what Chicago did, cold and bright and indifferent and magnificent, and she put her arm through his and felt him adjust his pace to hers without being asked, the way he had learned to move alongside her. And she thought about the word we said with effort the first time, and now simply the way they spoke. At Nico's, the host saw them coming through the door, and his face did exactly what it had done the first time, lit up warm and unperformed, the specific joy of a man who had known Adrian Moretti for 20 years and was watching him arrive somewhere he hadn't been before. Nico looked at Violet. "You're still here," he said. "I'm still here," she said. He looked at Adrian, then back at her. Then he pointed at her the same way he had the first time with emphasis. "I like her immediately," he said. "Every time." Adrian said nothing. But Violet, watching him, saw it again, the thing she had first seen in a garage. The thing that had been less managed and more visible every week since the thing he had said directly in the front room of a shop with her name above the door. She saw a man who had been seen. Not his power, not his name, not the weight of what he carried, just him. And that she had learned was both the simplest and the hardest thing one person could offer another. To look clearly, to keep looking, and to stay. She sat down across from him at the red checkered table. She picked up the menu she didn't need. She looked at him across the candlelight and thought about a rainy October night, and a broken bus, and a cracked heel, and a borrowed jacket, and about all the ways that night could have gone differently, and about the single, simple truth that it hadn't. Some people come into your life because you planned for them, and some people come through the rain an hour late, apologizing before they've even said hello, and they turn out to be the ones who stay. Adrian looked at her across the table. "The braised short rib," he said. "You always get it." "It's honest food," she said. "It doesn't try to be anything other than what it is." He looked at her. "No," he said quietly. "It doesn't." She smiled. She ordered the short rib. He ordered the pasta, the same dish every time, because that was the kind of man he was, and she had learned over the course of a year that had been difficult and real, and more than she'd known to want, that this was not a small thing. That a person who ordered the same pasta and finished what they started, and put lavender in a bedroom, because you mentioned it once and waited in the rain for an hour and 18 minutes, was in the ways that actually mattered exactly the person they said they were. And that kind of person once found was worth every ruined shoe, every broken bus, every rainstorm the city could throw. She raised her glass. He raised his. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Some things are complete without words, and what they had built across one improbable year, from one impossible night, was exactly that, complete, real, and entirely their own.